Conferences moving, conferences potentially moving, and now we have conferences alleging quite a bit in regards to the television aspect of all of this. We'll get into that in just a few minutes here at the Voice of College Football. Welcome in for another call-in show on a Wednesday night, 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific. Please leave your comments, your questions, debate topics, of course, in the live chat. Much to get to. We're going to lead off with Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football. Pac-12 Media convened yesterday, and so we will get right to it. Want to remind everyone that we are available on Patreon as well. Please get your Patreon subscription. Good time to do it. My predictions are there, as well as an insider look. And, of course, Steve Merrill from Pro Sports Info and Wager Talk to provide his exclusive pick of the week, as well as exclusive live streams per request each and every week. PayPal, Venmo, Cash App also available, and we will dive right into it. Again, Pac-12 Media Day on Tuesday, and Tony Siracusa was there as usual. Last Word on College Football to break it all down. Tony, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I am doing just fine, trying to keep up with everything.
It's crazy, right?
Not the typical off season.
It really isn't. I was discussing this with some people in the media yesterday, and we were talking about usually just before you get to conference media days, there's a little bit of a lull. You got a little bit of downtime, maybe get in that last bit of vacation if you're a college football writer before camp starts. This has become more like the NFL. It's just a 12-month news cycle now with college football the way it is right now, with all the shifting and potential lawsuits and everybody doing what they're going to do.
Yes, we in the media typically have what we call our evergreen material that we tend to go to, greatest plays, greatest games, all-time historic lists and so forth and so on that are fun to talk about and rank and do all that sort of thing. But no, not a time to catch your breath this offseason.
No, we canned all of ours. Yeah, we canned all of ours.
Transfer portal's been humming the entire time. Yeah. Recruiting's taken on a bit of a life of its own because of the dead period, and then it all just came rushing at us in regards to the commitments opening up on June 1st. And then, 12-team college football playoff proposal. And then NIL, of course, has been the huge topic after the proposal kind of died down, just to give us a respite there. But now we get slammed with maybe the biggest of the news I've been asked, and I don't know how far we would have to go back in history because of not just this doesn't work in a silo, of course, Tony, Texas, Oklahoma to the SEC, the ramifications across college football. We will see what it turns out to be. Of course, when we get to Pac-12 Media Days, we had Tony on a few days ago when the story first broke. So catch up with that in regards to Tony's thoughts about how this may or may not unfold and the ramifications. People are football minded, but of course, these are sports leagues. And they go to class and they're actually originally academic institutions.
In theory.
It's funny how a lot of these comments come in from the fans, and it's like this academic stuff just kind of gets in the way. They're like, they're moving teams around, creating super leagues, and that may come to fruition. But I think some people would be surprised as football fans how much money. I think there's also this thought process that football supports everything. Well, on the athletic side, it generally supports everything, but there's a lot of academic money in these endowments and so forth.
Yeah, and it doesn't really work if you want to take your favorite school and put them on a 2-week road trip in the middle of October because you've put them in some conference that is half a country away. It doesn't really work. I know it looks neat when you see a map. I think one of the things, and I think you've probably experienced this as well, in the heat of the news, we create more heat. And we see these memes and social media, and everybody who ever talked to anybody has a source, and they're saying this. And here's a map I saw. I actually saw a map where it broke down all of college football into all of these pods, and every conference has 4 pods. And people look at it, and they kept passing around. Look, it makes sense, right? Everyone smiles and nods, sure, until you take a deep breath and look at the details. and realized apparently we nuked TCU because they were nowhere on the map. One of the things I encourage people to do is take a deep breath. This is going to be a process. Yes, the news is breaking fast. It's breaking furiously. And you want to stay on top of it, but pay attention to the details. Pay attention to the facts. Ingrain yourself in that a little bit. Don't go for the quick, cheap hits, because those are going to take you in the wrong direction of where this actually winds up.
We have Tony join us on a regular basis, but this is Pac-12 Media Day, the day following, and Tony's joined us a number of consecutive years to wrap up Pac-12 Media Day, which has always been a pleasure to have him on here, as he has been able to sit down with a collection of the media. Sometimes it becomes a one-on-one affair, but typically with a collection of media, and circulate from coach to coach and hear what they have to say. And these guys make a ton of money. They have a lot of power, and they're the highest profile people in the sport. But we sometimes approach it like they have a say in all this, and they have no say in this. They can only kind of play along and offer their, of course, they don't want to say too much. So what could they really say during this Pac-12 media session of any value?
In terms of the conference shifting, nothing. Yeah. And they will acknowledge they have no idea and they have no say. And you and I know the reality. Maybe the athletic director at some point will call them into the office and say, what would you think if we had to shift to this conference or this time zone, or we were playing these teams? Give me your thoughts. But it's the presidents and chancellors of the universities in consultation with the athletic directors who are going to make these decisions, and the coaches are going to live to deal with whatever the consequences are. And frankly, they don't want to talk about it anyway. You come to an event like this, the big part of it was we had George Kliavkoff in his first real meeting with the media as the new commissioner of the Pac-12. This was big on his plate. This was a big topic for him, as you would well imagine, as well as the NIL and all of these other things that we've talked about. And if you were fortunate or unfortunate enough to be watching the press conference on the Pac-12 network, you saw him take issue with yours truly in the wording of one of my questions.
I missed this. My goodness. Many of us, Tony, it might be a shock to you, do not have the Pac-12 network.
I am not stunned. And that's part of the problem with the Pac-12 network. Look, he talked about what's going on with the other conferences. And he said, certainly we're paying attention, but there's this rush to assume that the Big 12 is now gone, which it's not. You and I discussed last week or 2 weeks ago different ways to potentially keep it alive, at least for a little bit, by them pulling 4 schools and recognizing you're not going to replace Oklahoma and Texas, but you go rate other conferences for the Cincinnati's, SMU's, what have you. And we had that plan. But under this assumption that the Pac-12 is going to take the leftovers from the Big 12, and we ran a column literally about 48 hours ago now saying, don't do it. If you're the Pac-12, do not feel the need to take those leftovers from the Big 12. They bring you nothing. And I'm going to insult some people here, and I don't mean to. So please, I'm watching the comments. I'm going to know when I've hit a button. Adding Lubbock, Texas, and adding Manhattan, Kansas, or Lawrence, Kansas, adds nothing to the Pac-12 as they're getting ready to negotiate their new TV contract. It's not going to expand the pie that they're going to get in revenue. The Pac-12 already has a Stillwater and a Lubbock. It's called Pullman and Corvallis. There's nothing that those markets add. Our plan, our thought was, same thing, go raid other conferences. Go take 4 teams. Matter of fact, go raid the state of Texas. Go raid Conference USA and the AAC. Go pull off SMU. Go pull off Houston, TCU, and Rice. I know Rice sounds a little weird, but trust me, we broke down the financials of these schools. They are endowed to the hilt. Their athletic departments are endowed to the hilt. TCU is financially revenue neutral right now in its athletic department, which is none of the Pac-12 schools can say that right now. And it gives you the state of Texas. Move Utah and Colorado to the Pac-12 North, because as one of my colleagues put it, if you go there to ski, you don't belong in the Pac-12 South. You should be in the Pac-12 North. Bring in these Texas schools. It brings you Houston and Dallas in terms of media markets. It brings you a good fan base. The Pac-12 fans, if they're going to travel to football games, they'd much rather go to Houston or Dallas than to Stillwater or Lubbock. It helps all around. Kliavkoff pointed out they are, and these are his words, because I'm going to make sure I get them correct so I don't get called out by anybody, that he doesn't see it as necessary. The expansion is not necessary. They are going to look at it. He said that they have taken calls. There was a story that broke yesterday that he was asked about that Texas Tech had already called. He obviously is neither going to confirm nor deny. He said it's not necessary, but they will look at the particulars and they will take phone calls as they come. The interesting part came, well, interesting if you were me, was at the end when I said, so it's not a priority for you, but Texas and Oklahoma sent their letter to the SEC today. So the clock is now moving. The calendar is now turning pages. So do you feel compelled by time elements? Are you going to have to move a little quicker? And on TV, he corrected me and said, I did not say it wasn't a priority. I said, we don't think it's necessary. Okay, we're splitting hairs. Look, if it's not necessary, you're not making it a priority. And if it's not a priority, it's not necessary. So, but he didn't like my choice of words, but he did acknowledge, yes, if something comes to the table, we will move quickly. Time will be an issue. So it was an interesting, conversation with him in the media. He actually has a plan to try to financially salvage the Pac-12 network. It was interesting. He said it doesn't have enough eyes. I don't like the fact that it doesn't have enough eyes watching it. It's a problem. He used those words. It is a problem. But there's nothing we can do about it under the current contractual format. We can't make any significant changes until 2024. They don't have DirecTV. They don't have AT&T on board. What they are going to do, little creativity here, they're going to work in an NIL format. They have created a licensing division within the Pac-12 network where the highlights of players, if they're going to need them for marketing, if the sponsors want them, that kind of thing, that it's going to be used for those purposes, that there will be revenue gained from being able to sell some of the rights to some of the highlights and video presentation from the network. He talked about NIL. He talked about it pretty quickly because he's in favor of it, been in favor of it for a long time. And he said, I think we just need to watch the kind of deals that come in. He urged the players to be smart about what they do. But of course, the conference has long been in favor of it. So it was an interesting first conversation with the new commissioner.
Talking Pac-12 Media Day with Tony Siracusa. Last Word on College Football. Please join him and the rest of the crew over there on Last Word on College Football to get you set for the college football season, which is just about 5 weeks away. We've got a couple big ones on week 0, UCLA, Hawaii,
against Hawaii,
Nebraska, Illinois, a Big Ten game
right
in week 0. And then, of course, in week 1, we've got the full slate of games. Tony, you had mentioned the Nick Rolovich news, of course, came out prior to Media Day. That was interesting that in this climate that we live in and the pandemic not going away entirely, here we're practically a year and a half into it, that a lot of businesses, a lot of government entities are taking certain precautions in whether you want to consider them mandates or suggestions that are certainly more so than the word would suggest. And with Nick Rolovich, due to what he described, and correct me if I'm wrong, are personal reasons that have not been divulged, has not been vaccinated, was not able to attend Pac-12 Media Days.
Correct.
He therefore is going to continue to coach the team.
Correct.
Made a statement that he's not against vaccinations. It's a personal decision based on his situation, whatever that may be. and seem to promote vaccinations for his team to a certain extent.
Yeah, it was a bit awkward. Look, the day before he made the statement, his school president came out in favor of everybody vaccinating. It was interesting. If you look back at SEC Media Days last week, the schools were anywhere from 65 to 80, maybe 85% vaccinated in terms of the teams. 9 of the 12 schools in the Pac-12 are currently living under state mandates where all students, including athletes, must be vaccinated before they return to campus in the fall. So the vaccination rates on the Pac-12 schools are in the 90% plus rate. Nobody, in fact, is below 90%. Most schools are at 95%. Stanford, I think, was at about 99%. So it's going to be considerably higher. With regards to Washington State, it's a sticky situation for Rolovich. If you remember last year, he got on the hot seat with the way he handled some of the players when they wrote that kind of infamous letter demanding their rights within the COVID protocols. They wanted transparency. They wanted third parties to do the testing, so it wasn't schools who had a vested interest in them playing. They wanted to know how the testing was going to work. And they wrote a letter, and dozens of players signed off on it, sent it to the commissioner's office. Rolovich was recorded by a player in his office with Rolovich telling the player, anyone signs this letter, there isn't going to be a place for you on this team. And the receiver, his first name escapes me, his last name was Cassidy. But anyway, he sat out the season. He opted out for health reasons and COVID reasons. And when he came back to work out a few days later, his locker had been cleared out. And Rolovich told him there was no place for him there. And so he didn't win a lot of fans with parents that way. Then he had a bad season. Then he had a really bad recruiting season where his recruiting finished 9th in the conference and about 65th overall in the country. And now you've got this. Look, and we can have a 10-hour discussion on civil liberties and whether he's got the individual right to do this. Of course he has the individual right. But he's also being put in a tough situation because the state of Washington is in the midst of passing legislation like these other states that says public schools, including the universities, from middle school on up, you have to be vaccinated once these drugs, once the vaccinations become fully approved by the FDA, which will be January to February of next year. Now, because it's in the middle of the school year, the legislation moves it to the following academic year. So 2021-22. At some point, and the personal exemption gets removed. You can have a religious or health exemption. So if Rolovich isn't willing to be a little more forthcoming, which right now there is nothing requiring him to be forthcoming, and he is exercising his right, but at some point the rubber's going to meet the road. And it sounds a little weird when you're on a Zoom screen, when the rest of the coaches are there and the players are there, and you're urging everyone to get vaccinated while you're admitting you're choosing to sit it out. It was really awkward.
It's an awkward media day all around because football is taking a back seat to all these other issues that are affecting the football and have affected the football for the last year and a half, starting with the pandemics, NIL, and now these other issues with Herm Edwards. It's recruiting violations issues or alleged recruiting violations.
Or as Herm called it yesterday, a review. He gave a statement at the beginning. I clearly said, look, it's under NCAA review, these allegations. So I'm not going to discuss them, not going to answer questions about them. And of course, media people ask questions anyway, because it's just what we do. And he said, I'm not getting, but he kept calling it a review. Someone actually asked him, do you think the recruiting investigation, or do you think the NCAA investigation is going to hurt recruiting? And he said, the what? And he said, oh, you mean the NCAA review? No, it won't hurt. It won't hurt anything. The review. I heard from some sources while I was there, and people I trust pretty well, this isn't going to go well for her. Or Antonio Pierce, the assistant who really is at the focal point of the allegations, holding recruiting visits at midnight to try and hide them while they were in a dark period because of COVID. There are video cameras all over the place for security purposes. He was handing in receipts for expenses, and somebody from within the program turned him in. And it is well known Antonio Pierce has a lot of people in the staff in the athletic department who don't like him. He's very much a do it my way or get out kind of guy. And their answer is, you're an assistant coach, settle down. So someone from within is the one who turned them in.
Tony, I believe we had you on at some point when this story was breaking, and also had Michelle Gardner on. She writes for the Arizona Republic, had her on to review it. And I can't get past, there is a moral / ethical portion to doing what's right, obeying the rules, obeying the laws, that sort of thing. Unless maybe you have a moral exception to whatever that rule or law is. But 99 point some percent of the time, everybody can agree on the rules or the laws. Okay. It's one thing to disregard the ethical portion of it, the moral obligation, and just say, hey, we want to cheat and win. And then there's another layer of that goes beyond to just the risk reward aspect of it, the just being discerning, wise, prudent about it to determine, okay, is this really worth it? What is the gain here? And this just crosses those lines for me into, I just don't know what seemingly intelligent people are thinking that they're really going to gain from these slight recruiting advantages versus the risk involved. Again, taking the moral and ethical side of it out, it just dumbfounds me sometimes what people are willing to do to that end.
Yeah, look, I'm totally on board with you on this. It makes no sense. They got a handful of those recruits, maybe 5 or 6 signed in December and or February. But what's it going to cost you in the end? If and when, and if our sources are accurate, and it comes down pretty significantly, look, you're going to lose some scholarships. You're going to be put on probation. Some coaches are going to lose their jobs. Don't know if Herm will, or if it's going to be people under him. You're going to damage the program significantly for years to come. Was it really worth it? I mean, for what? You've got a decent team. We're not talking about a team that's on the cusp of competing for a playoff spot, and you lost your way and decided, I need that extra push, right? This isn't Nick Nolte and Blue Chips, right? I mean, you're a middle of the conference team, and when you get those recruits and they signed, you're still a middle of the conference team. Was it really worth it?
And depending on how you're gauging the value system of the recruits that you're dealing with, you may be turning them off. They may assess the situation, and they may think it's kind of cool that I stepped on campus and was able to get this visit, and then they may readdress it in their own thought process later and say, nobody else is doing this. Is that really, it's one thing to think that those people are cool, or that was kind of neat, versus having long-term respect for them. So
I think that's true. I think when you go home, if you're a recruit, when you go home and the fun of the weekend wears off and you take other visits to other places that seem more, well, you couldn't take other visits because it was a dark period, but you hear about other people's visits when they were legal and what they did and where they went, and you have Zoom meetings with coaches and they're spending time with you. All of a sudden you're like, this was really weird. And I don't know if I want to sign with weird. Like I said, he got a handful of the recruits. He didn't get more than half. So what were the rest of them thinking? Why didn't they sign? And I think you bring up a great point about the perception that they walk away with.
And we'll never know how many they would have signed had they not gone to those measures.
Sure.
Tony, you've got a big fan in Sam here. Giving
I
it a thumbs
appreciate
up
that.
right there.
I appreciate that, Sam.
We also have New York Buck. Thank you so much for giving us 20 of those New York Bucks. Thank you so much, New York Buck. Thank you so much. No comment there or anything, just appreciating the channel. Thank you. We appreciate you. We got Tony Syracuse on the line from Last Word on College Football, and I would urge everyone to head on over there, check out Tony's work, the rest of the crew over there. We lean on them heavily. Kevin McGuffey, Jason Ray as well do fine work. So get ready for your college football season. Include them in your reading. No question about that. Before I get to this Big 12 story and anything you may have, and I know I'm hitting you with this, and I really have not had a chance to look into it. I was on live when somebody pointed it out in terms of Big 12 ESPN allegations there, and then I had a number of other things to do and really didn't look at this. But before we get to that, I'd like to see if was there any football that came out of the Pac-12 Media Day, anything that you can latch on to that was interesting by any of the 12 member schools?
Yeah, there really was. I think one of the more interesting coaches we met with yesterday was Jedd Fisch, the first-year coach at Arizona. The excitement from him was palpable. I mean, it really was. This guy this is his first head coaching job ever. I mean, he was interim for like 2 weeks at UCLA when Jim Mora got fired, but he's been an assistant at UCLA and Michigan and years in the NFL, with New England and different franchises in the NFL. This guy is so excited to have this job. And as a media person, it was fun because it was authentic. It wasn't a lot of coach speak. And, he talked about what they did during the summer. And he said, we want our players to learn about a lot of different things, not just spend all the time in the film room or the weight room. So once a week, every week, we had guest speakers in to talk about a range of things. We had a guest speaker come in and talk about African-American studies or indigenous peoples in America. We brought in Barry Scheck from the Innocence Project to talk about the law and civil rights and things like that. We had NFL GMs in to talk about, what it's like to do their job and the kinds of things they look at. It was just interesting to hear someone with a different perspective who was doing different things. And it was really funny because he was talking about what it's going to be like. Look, they were terrible under Kevin Sumlin. Stadium was half empty because why wouldn't it be, right? And he said, we're really going to do a lot of changes in game day, man. He wants to turn this thing into a party. And those are his words, not mine. He said, we're going to incorporate lots of music. We're going to have pregame concerts right outside the stadium. He said, we're going to have a party atmosphere. Matter of fact, I have his words right here. I believe it should be the best 4-hour party because that's what college football is. And if you miss out on that, you're missing out on college football. And we missed it in 2020, and we're going to bring it back. He said, we're going to find a way to have a party atmosphere. It was fun listening to this guy because he's so pumped up. He's like, we're going to bring back the catwalk for Arizona fans to bring the team off the bus. Someone asked him, apparently during spring camp, he had open practices for the media, for fans even. And he said, and his answer was, I don't know why you would ever close them, quite frankly. He said, I'm going to keep them closed during prep week for games, obviously. He said, but spring camp, fall camp, he said, I want the media there. I want the media to see what we're doing because it's better that they see what we do than guess about it and write all kinds of silly stuff. They can see it up close and personal. The fans can see it up close and personal because it's supposed to be a fun experience. He said, if you don't want to have fun doing this and you don't want to engage the fans, go coach in the NFL. He said, if you're going to do college football, it's about the atmosphere and the fun and the band and the student section and all those things. Man, that was fun hearing that.
Now, part of this might be Jedd Fisch's personality. This might be his approach regardless. Part of this might be him just being aware of the situation. He's not Jimmy Lake taking over for Chris Peterson at Washington, where the stadium's full every week and you're already going 9-3, 10-2 every year. Just take it over. Don't screw it up. Build upon it. Keep it going. No, Arizona's a disaster at this point. So
yeah, I think there's a little bit of both in that. I really do think there's a little bit of who he is. You know, he spent time in the NFL, but most of his coaching career as an assistant has been in college. And when you come from a place like Michigan, where he spent a lot of time there, and you got all the pomp and circumstance that goes with Michigan and Michigan football and all that. And it was a lot of fun. We spent a lot of time with David Shaw. I'm a big David Shaw fan. I like to call him the thinking man's coach, because if you're a member of the media, you can sit down with David Shaw for an hour and have all these conversations, and not even X's and O's, because he'll tell you who his backup long snapper is if you really want to know, whatever. But you can talk about the NCAA and rules and the college landscape and conferences and all these things, and you walk away after an hour saying, "Man, that was a pretty thought-provoking." It was a pretty thought-provoking conversation. This was interesting to me because I have not heard, at least anyone else, hit this point about Alabama and Nick Saban. The conversation was about NIL, and he's very big into, look, our guys are not jumping all over this. He gets a little arrogant. He said, we're Stanford people. We're different. We're going to sit back. We're going to look at it. We're going to see how it works. Our guys are going to make decisions that are based on what they want to do. It's not going to be just grabbing the money. It's going to be, does this fit me and who I am and where I want to go in the future? All of those things. Someone said, but what about Bryce Young, who allegedly has a close to seven-figure deal, or a lot of deals that add up to close to seven. Now, no one has actually ever verified this. And that's where Shaw jumped in. He said, my gut reaction is on multiple levels. And I have his quote here because it's important that I get it right. He said, first of all, Nick Saban is smarter than any 10 of us in the room combined. He said, there is no way that was just a throw-in comment that Saban did about that money. It's obvious to me Nick wanted to plant that and make sure people knew it, because it's a great way to recruit people to come play for you. Which this guy hasn't even started a college football game, and you're going to tell me he's already signed all these deals to make that money? Come on, I'm not so sure about that. He said, because I don't think that's the true market value. He said, I think that's the Alabama market value, but I'm not sure that's the global true market value. So he called Saban out a little bit with some tongue-in-cheek admiration. It was kind of like, all right, Nick, we see you, we hear you. It's not so sure it's true, but I see what you're doing there.
Nick Saban looking for a recruiting advantage.
Go figure.
Certainly needs one.
Go figure. I do have one thing for you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I got one thing for you that, for you personally, I think is very important, because I know of your sartorial choices when it comes to college football uniforms. And of course, UCLA has the new deal with Jumpman and Jordan. We've seen the uniforms. They put them on display earlier in the week. The helmets are now true gold. They don't have a yellowish tint to them. And it's funny because Chip Kelly had an off-cuff comment about the difference, and it was from a question that I asked about the difference from when he was at Oregon to now. And it came from a conversation from David Shaw, which we don't need to get into. But Kelly said the difference is we wore shiny helmets and used 5 wide receivers. Well, that's, he was being glib, and then he got into a serious answer. Someone asked him, he said, since you mentioned shiny helmets, what about some alternative uniforms for UCLA? You got the new ones. Are you going to use some flashy alternate uniforms, for special occasions? Chip's answer was a definitive no, absolutely not. He said, one of the things I like about UCLA is you don't have to make decisions on a uniform standpoint, because there are some football programs that have iconic football uniforms. And I'm thinking, Mark Rogers is going to be on board with this. He said, UCLA is one of those. You walk into an airport, you look at the TV out of the corner of your eye, and you can tell if it's Alabama or Penn State or UCLA based on the look of the uniform. The new uniforms will be it. There will be no alternate uniforms. I knew you would approve.
My heart did skip a beat there when you brought up the uniforms and the new uniforms and then possible alternate uniforms, because UCLA has the best uniforms in college football.
Yeah,
That
look,
is my opinion.
I
That's
think
where I stand on it.
I hear you. We've had that conversation quite a bit, and the new Jumpman uniforms look pretty sharp. The gold is really gold. They've gone back to the traditional gold pants with the blue shirts, and they look sharp.
Check them out.
Yeah,
I will check them out. David Knight, you talk about cool. Tony's cucumber cool.
All right,
Tony,
I'll take it.
You're building quite the legion here.
I guess so.
Everyone appreciates Tony coming on because the analysis is always insightful, and I'm going to stretch it beyond the Pac-12 to help me out a little bit here, because I've basically just read the first paragraph. So basically, this is pretty serious. Whether Bob Bowlesby and the Big 12 is doing this just as a parting shot to try to salvage something, or they have something of substance under their sleeves to drop on us as a bombshell. The Big 12 Conference, in a series of scathing allegations by Commissioner Bob Bowlesby, following the delivery by the conference in a cease and desist letter to the worldwide leader of sports, ESPN. So basically, Bowlesby accusing and the Big 12 accusing ESPN of attempting to actively undermine the future of the conference by not only working with Texas and Oklahoma for months, and that's been well reported, substantiated pretty much 6 months, that Oklahoma and Texas have been in talks with the SEC, but also trying to manipulate other conferences into not, joining the Big 12 to let it collapse. And we know that every conference has a contract with the ESPN series of networks to a degree. But some conferences have larger stakes in them. For example, the Big 10, the Pac-12, and the Big 12 are partnered more heavily with Fox. Currently, the SEC, of course, has a network with ESPN, and of course, that's going to expand even greater once CBS's contract runs out. So ESPN does have a large stake in the SEC with a network, the ACC with a network, and a larger TV deal on the main network than they do with the Big 10, the Pac-12, and the Big 12 here. So this is serious stuff here.
It is, and maybe it is. Look, I read it. The first news that came out was the cease and desist letter, and I openly laughed. And because I figured the lawyers at ESPN are laughing. Look, I'm no lawyer, but I've hung around enough, and I know enough of them that I'll pretend, I'll be make-believe lawyer here. You've got no chance of shutting down ESPN talking about the Big 12, talking about the departure, talking about the SEC because you send a cease and desist letter. Are you kidding me? It was, and the verbiage that was used in there was laughable. It sounded like something that came out of my cousin Vinny with some of the word salad that he was using in his allegations. It was like, ESPN's looking at it going, yeah, okay, buddy. Well, you want to challenge this? We'll see you in court in 6 months, because no judge, there was nothing substantive there that would cause a judge to give an ex parte or emergency hearing on this and say, yes, we're going to hear your allegations to determine if there is cause for a real hearing. And an ex parte motion would mean you're going to hear it in the next 72 hours. There is nothing there that said, yes, this warrants it. This just said, hey, stop talking about us because we're accusing you of having something to do with it. Part of Bowlesby's problem in this, as you just pointed out, is that there was it's become verified that Oklahoma and Texas were talking about this 6 months ago. You're the commissioner of the conference, and you just admitted in this interview you found out about it the same way everybody else did, on a news flash on your phone a week ago. That doesn't really speak well to your leadership of the conference. So if people are leaving out from under you, you are partially to blame. Now, subsequently, the news broke that They allegedly have emails. They allegedly have paperwork that shows that ESPN was in cahoots, we'll say, to keep the My Cousin Vinny theme going, that says, yes, they had conversations. Okay, now, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but I've got enough experience with lawyers to tell you, unless those emails come from someone who could actually pull the trigger to make this change happen, which is probably 2 or 3 people total in that whole group, it doesn't matter. Some mid-level guy sending an email to whomever at Texas and OU saying, hey, you guys should think about the SEC someday, doesn't amount to anything unless it came from somebody who could make that actionable. That's the key part there, actionable. If no one at ESPN did anything that made that change actionable prior to Oklahoma and ESPN going to them, then he's got nothing. So if you do have these emails, you better be prepared to produce them pretty quickly, because that pretty much is all you've got. Because right now you've got essentially 3 defendants, ESPN, Texas, and Oklahoma. You're going to put them in a courtroom, and we're oversimplifying it, but you're going to put them in a courtroom and say, did you work with ESPN and Texas against us? Oklahoma's going to say no. Texas will be asked the same thing. They'll say no. ESPN will say no. That's it, unless you have actual, and it can't be hearsay. It can't be, well, I heard it from this person who reports to this person. None of that's good enough unless you got documentation. So it's, and they claim that they do. That's the linchpin right there. If they do, you know what? They have damages that they can go get against ESPN. Can they stop Texas and OU from leaving? No, they really can't. And what Texas and OU are going to say, again, since there's going to be a judge that's going to grant an ex parte hearing, Oklahoma and Texas and ESPN are like, you want to file? Go ahead and file. And the county courthouse is over there. We'll see in 6 months when they schedule the hearing, whatever, you know? And if it winds up being true, then fine. You've gotten damages from ESPN, and it'll be payable maybe if you're even still around as a conference, but it's not going to be enough to stop this from happening. They have a contractual right to leave. There are buyout clauses and all those things which will be fulfilled. And as long as they fulfill them, they have a right to leave. Doesn't matter who talked to them. The Pac-12 network could have talked to them. You know, it doesn't matter, because there are contractual elements that allow them to leave, and they're exercising them. And they're exercising them, by all appearances, appropriately.
Yeah, it states in this article that ESPN is actively attempting to break the Big 12 apart by arranging landing spots for the remaining members. Again, you're gonna have to show actionable conversations where Greg Sankey is, you know, the marionette guy, you know, pulling the strings on everybody, directing Iowa State to go to the Big Ten, and, you know, Oklahoma and whoever else to go to the Conference USA, or Oklahoma State rather, to go to the Conference USA. Man, you are putting a big burden on yourself to prove things that may or may not be provable. It states in this article that ESPN is the Big 12's largest media member. So I may have misspoken to a certain extent. I was just kind of comparing the number of games, the quality of the games on the networks, and obviously ESPN is sole media source from a television standpoint, currently to the ACC, in the future for the SEC. While again, the Fox trifecta, the Big 12, the Big 10, and the Pac-12, that, you know, you can get a thread of not necessarily truth, but logic there in at least as
some convincibility. Yeah, you get some convincibility. But here's another element. Oklahoma has not been shy about complaining about Bowlesby and the Big 12 and for years. I'm going to put it at 2 to 3 years. They don't like the 11 o'clock start times, which, you know, I think it's funny. The Pac-12 is about to have some 9 a.m. start times. So whatever with your 11 o'clock, cry somewhere else. But the point being, they've been vocal. So this is not something that just happened all of a sudden. If Bowlesby is caught off guard by this, then really the blame is on you. You haven't been paying enough attention.
Yeah, he did not look good. Again, as you mentioned, revealing how he found out the news, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, that the Big 12 kicked off all the media days much earlier than the other ones a few weeks ago, and he made a statement at some point during that about there being no conference expansion or realignment on the horizon.
Right. And literally within, I think it was 5 days, maybe 6 days after that, this news hit. And again, as you point out, to admit how we found out, man, that's the thing you should have kept to yourself as much as humanly possible, not just because it's embarrassing, but because it's damaging to your legal cause of action.
Yes. And then again, to make the statement now, had the Pac-12 had a couple teams picked off or something had happened in some other conference, that would not have been a good look for him in not being aware of the landscape of the sport and having communications and being having that kind of relationship with the other conference commissioners. But when it's your league and it's the two linchpins in your league and you make that statement, again, another misstep there. When you don't know, just don't say.
Well, and I think one of the things you and I have discussed over probably the last year and a half is the concept of the Power Five conferences. And especially last year, I think this really came to fruition last year when we talked about COVID and how people were handling different things. There is no Power Five. There really aren't. There are 5 big conferences. They do not act as one. Not at all, not anymore. And how they handled COVID last year was certainly the breaking point of that. They are 5 large conferences who are all in it for themselves, who all do whatever they need to do. Greg Sankey is pretty much eating everybody's lunch for them. But that issue aside, is if you're relying on the kindness of your fellow 4 other commissioners to really have these conversations, wake up, man. This is a business. Yes, they are students, as you said at the very beginning. They go to classes, but running the athletic department and the TV contracts and the schedule and who you're playing and who you're not playing, how many, G5 schools you're going to play and you're out of conference, how many FCS schools you're going to deal with, things like that. Those are business decisions. And if you're expecting the other 4 to look after you in some sort of group kumbaya, you don't belong in the office where you currently reside.
Well put. There's no question about that. Tony Siracusa, last word on college football. We extended him past the Pac-12. He keeps his eye on the entire landscape, of course, but
we are
lean
busy.
Heavily on you for UCLA and the Pac-12 in particular. But of course, Tony's again watching it all.
Hey, I got one quick NIL story for you yesterday. If you got time from yesterday. Kayvon Thibodeau. This is a guy the whole country needs to be watching if you haven't been already. All right. The guy is a beast. Defensive lineman, now turned linebacker at Oregon. He was one of the first players at Oregon from California when Oregon started going down and stealing the California Defensive Players of the Year, which has now become routine. And he's a smart young man. I mean, you look at him, he's got his shirt all buttoned up, he's got his glasses on, and he's talking about his NIL deal. And a couple of things about this. One, he said he's not going to hire any representation for his NIL contracts. He's going to do it himself. He said, I want to make sure that this is not about money. He said, of course it's about money. I'm going to get paid for whatever I do, but I want to make sure it's the right people. I want to talk about social issues. I want to talk about education. I want to be able to have a platform to talk about those things in my NIL deals. It's not just whoever's offering me the most money. Matter of fact, it probably won't be whoever's offering me the most money. It'll be the ones that make the most sense for me. However, having said that, he talked about the first deal that he has signed. And it is with, we'll call it a company for now, that is working with their art department and their graphic design department. And they are creating artwork of him and different things of him in action and on the field, which will be online for sale through different mediums. And he will sign some of it and whatever the case may be. The graphic designer is a guy who helps create logos for a company called Nike. And Kayvon described his conversation about how he signed this deal. And he said he got a call from Phil Knight, and he didn't believe it was Phil Knight. And Knight called him directly because he doesn't have any representation. And they were about 2 minutes into the conversation, and Kayvon said, "Who is this again?" And he said, "It's Philip Knight." And all of a sudden, he realized who it really was. And he blurted out, "Uncle Phil, is that you?" Kayvon Thibodeau is already calling Phil Knight Uncle Phil as they build this relationship. The kid's going to have a future with some money. He's going to have some big NFL money ahead of him. He's on the list for the Nagurski Award for Defensive Player of the Year. He's going to have some options coming his way. But I love the story. He just was unabashed about admitting. All of a sudden, I realized it really was him, and I said, "Uncle Phil, is that you?"
Yeah, it's somewhat close to what you hear from time to time when a big mega sports star signs with a particular team, and the phrase is thrown out there, "So and so, we're about to become partners," basically, right. Because
yes.
my weight in this is so heavy that you're basically signing the company over to me, the
Exactly.
team over to me.
Exactly.
All right, Tony, we've kept you a long time. We appreciate you really breaking it down for us.
Always glad to do it, Mark. There is a reason you are the voice of college football, so I'm always glad to do my part and help out.
Thank you so much. And last word on college football, everyone. Tony and the crew over there, jump on board and get ready for the college football season. Thanks, Tony.
All right, take care.
All right, wow. So another big day as the Big 12 seems to be getting a little desperate if Tony's hunches are correct. And that was my initial thought. And again, I read like a paragraph before we jumped on here, is that this reeks of some level of desperation and knowing what Bob Bowlesby has been unable to do and the vulnerability that he's shown in other aspects of this leading into this, that I think that, hey, if he sees the conference crumbling, maybe he's just taking a last-ditch effort to damage ESPN, to damage Texas and Oklahoma, although they're off and running and they're off to the SEC. I don't see them as any kind of collateral damage. It's more toward ESPN and possibly the SEC if they're in cahoots in terms of placing these schools, these programs. But it's all going to come down to the evidence. It is all going to come down to the evidence, and the evidence coming from high-ranking people that can make decisions. Excuse me, as Tony had certainly outlined for us. All right, we are here to take your calls at 860-499-3332. I will get the number to the screen in just a second. Appreciate everybody being here. Appreciate the super chats that came in. I acknowledged a few of them. We also had our guy, Falconer X. Thank you so much for the super sticker. We appreciate it. We are here because of you. I've been doing the same thing over and over for years. We just have more people watching now, and that's a credit again to you. So please let people know out there that love college football. You got a lot of sports fans out there that they have their seasons, and now we're ramping up to the NFL and college football. Bring them on board. Other people they'll sit and listen to me talk about college football in the middle of May, but other people are more seasonal, and we're ramping up toward the season. So let's go to Anthony to start us out tonight. Anthony, welcome to the Voice of College Football.
Hi, Mark. Again, like I said, you're one of my favorite college football shows, to be honest, because you give your unabashed opinions and you don't care who you're going to offend.
Yeah, I don't want to offend people. I'm not out there to offend people, but I'm also going to just tell the truth and the perspective from my vantage point, and hopefully do that in a clear and concise and forthright way. Absolutely. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
And honestly, when I look at this whole conference realignment thing, it was bound to happen because aren't the TV contracts finishing up in like two or 3 years for each conference for like ESPN and like CBS or like CBS? Wait, is the SEC CBS or NBC? I'm confused.
The SEC is currently CBS, but it's coming to an end, and it's not been renegotiated. CBS is going to be out of SEC football as of 2 years from now, and ESPN is going from being a large partner with the SEC, of course, with the SEC network and carrying a ton of SEC games also on the main networks. But CBS always had that number one and sometimes number two game of the week, where ESPN's taking it all as of, I believe, 2 football seasons from now.
Okay. And honestly, this is how I see it happening. These are the teams that I see joining the ACC. To be honest, West Virginia, of course, Notre Dame, because they already have a partnership. When does their do you know when their TV contract with NBC finishes by chance?
I don't off the top of my head. I can look it up. Keep going. West Virginia, Notre Dame. Okay.
Cincinnati.
Okay.
Would that be 16 or 17 teams?
So that brings us to 17.
Okay, actually, no, my mistake. Honestly, I would leave Notre Dame as independent. Honestly, I would bring in Cincinnati, West Virginia. Actually, replace West Virginia with UCF and stuff like that. So UCF and Cincinnati, to me, become. And honestly, I would say the Big Ten and the ACC, in my honest opinion, I know Wholesome disagrees with me geographically. Would it make sense? But to me, it actually makes geographical sense because you're going up the Atlantic coast and all the way, like making a U shape to the Midwest in like Ohio, Michigan, and all those states and stuff. So to me, in a sense, that makes more geographical sense into what he was saying when it comes to the ACC merging with another a conference like the Big 12 or something like that. So I honestly disagree with Wholesome in a sense where I think for me it would make more geographical sense for the ACC if we don't add teams to merge with the Big 10 and stuff like that, and have all the Atlantic coast going up the Atlantic coast except for South Carolina, and then all the Big 10 teams. Do you agree with me or Wholesome in terms of which conference the ACC should merge with, in your honest opinion?
So the remaining football playing teams in the Big 12 are not very attractive. There's just not that much there, on a grand scale. Of course, they make money and bring in 50 and 60,000 people per game. So they're worth something.
Except for the rivalry with West Virginia, Virginia Tech, Miami, and the old Big East teams, they don't really bring a ton of cachet or money in terms of revenue. The TV market is not as big as people make it out to be. I don't think it is as big as people make it out to be. I think the bigger markets for me in that area are DC, Virginia, which is Virginia Tech and Virginia, and New York, basically Syracuse and that area, and like Pittsburgh, is actually a bigger market than West Virginia. So, in a sense, I would say money-wise, it doesn't make sense for the ACC to. I understand the rivalries and the history, but financially, you agree with me, it makes no sense to add a West Virginia. They're not going to be bringing a ton of revenue to
No, they won't.
ACC.
I think I saw recently that Morgantown, West Virginia is like the 240th sized TV market in the country. And there are certain football programs that are out in the middle of nowhere. Therefore, they kind of gobble up a lot of space, meaning that if you go out to the Northwest, between the West Coast and the Midwest, there's not a whole lot of college football. Therefore, you're going to find Colorado and Nebraska and Minnesota football fans all scattered through Montana, Wyoming. If you want to root for major college football and you live in those states, then those schools have larger fan bases in those areas of the country. But in West Virginia, you are smothered between Ohio State and Penn State and Pitt and Virginia and Virginia Tech and Kentucky. So really, they don't have a whole lot of territory. It's basically their state.
Market, I think.
Yep.
Because there's not. I don't consider San Diego State or the colleges in Northern California really a major, like a Power 5 school. So I think Oregon, the market there is all Oregon or maybe USC or something like that. Do you agree when it comes to California?
So you're telling me that San Diego State is not attractive? They are from a market standpoint.
No. What I'm saying is their market, they're not like considered major college football. What I'm talking about by major is Power 5. They're not a Power 5 school, so that their market is more of a. I can't believe I'm using a college basketball term. They're a mid-major. They're a small fish in a big pond. That's what I'm saying. In terms of college football, I think Northern California, in terms of major Power 5 college football, is Oregon in Northern California. Am I correct or am I off?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of examples of schools that are in major cities, and those major cities are pro sports towns, and they give little attention to the college team. Boston College, for example. But yeah, San Diego State is a quote unquote, as you just stated, mid-major. And if you gobble up San Diego State, if you're the Pac-12, does that help you? You would think it would to a certain extent. It would give San Diego State football a little more cachet being in the Pac-12, and maybe some people that enjoy college football would tend to tune into the games more so in the southern portion of California, but it's not going to move the needle.
Okay. And when it comes to these, like, do you think eventually, once these deals finish up, ESPN or like these major, what is it called, major TV networks, if one of them stays with the Pac-12, they might convince them to move their games a little bit earlier, maybe to 8 o'clock kickoff time or something like that, instead of having like 8 o'clock on the West Coast and like 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock on the East Coast when it comes to the primetime games, because sometimes the primetime games at 9 o'clock or 10 makes no sense, like for the West Coast and stuff.
Well,
so
it makes no sense for you. It makes no sense for you. Where do you live?
I'm on the East Coast.
Exactly. So it makes no sense for you. And I understand what you're saying. And a lot of people say the same thing, that love college football and want to see everybody play and are trying to solve the problems of the Pac-12. But the Pac-12 has an inherent problem that they just can't get away from. And it's based in the time zones. And it's not that they should just give up and say, well, can't do anything about it. People aren't going to watch our games because of the time zones. They've tried to get creative, especially this pandemic 2020 football season, where they played games at 9 a.m. in the morning on the West Coast so that they could be on at noon. So think of it this way, Anthony. that the major broadcasting windows are noon Eastern time, 3:30 Eastern time, and then there are games that kick off at 7:30, 8 o'clock is typically that ABC window at 8 o'clock. And then you're referring to the games that the Pac-12 will play on ESPN, ESPN2, and Fox. Some of those games will kick off as late as 11 o'clock Eastern time, but usually 10 or 10:30 Eastern. Well, consider this. The games that college football fans typically get the most excited about are when? They're in prime time, correct?
Yeah, prime time, 8 o'clock.
Sure.
7, 8 o'clock, maybe.
Let's say Ohio
and
State.
Would you consider 9 prime time?
So let's say Ohio State and Penn State are playing. It's 8 o'clock Eastern. It's on ABC. That's a big deal. That's everybody's thinking this is an 8 o'clock Eastern time game. Okay. That also has to do with the folks buying the tickets and tailgating and the event at the stadium. If you have all the games, number one, if you have all the games in the Pac-12 kicking off at, let's say at 5 o'clock at the latest, they're kicking off their best games at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on the West Coast, so that they can accommodate the TV windows at 8 o'clock Eastern. Number one, understand that it's 5 o'clock on the West Coast. For those people that aren't college football nuts and watching college football all day, but they want to go to the beach, go shopping, do whatever they do on a Saturday, and then come home and watch the late night game, that game's not a primetime game for them. It's not a primetime game in LA, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, all those locales. It's not a primetime game. It's a 5 p.m. game. Number one. Number two, the one thing that the Pac-12 does have working slightly, I don't want to say in its advantage, but understand that every time during the day in which they're playing football, they're going to be competing against the other conferences. So if they play a lot of 12:30 games, they kick off a lot of 12:30 games because that's the 3:30 window Eastern time. And they're competing against the SEC and the Big Ten and everybody else that's playing 3:30 games. The one time of the day that if you want to watch college football, you're going to watch the Pac-12 is when they kick off prime time for them. So it is a prime time game for LA, San Francisco, and all those major markets on the West Coast at 8 Eastern, or I'm sorry, 8 Pacific. And those are the only games to watch if you're watching college football late night, East Coast, Central Time Zone. Those are the only games, so they don't compete against anyone. So there is a slight advantage in that checklist for the Pac-12 there.
But is there a way you can actually, when it comes to the primetime games and stuff, to be more, I'm not sure how to say this, but like cut it down the middle where you're accommodating to the East Coast and West Coast? There's no way you can actually do that. It's too hard.
Well, there's no way to do it with one single game because you're either primetime East Coast or you're primetime West Coast. But you can do it strategically involving the entire conference.
Oh, and back to what I was saying before about the merger. You, in your honest opinion, do you agree with me or Wholesome in terms of which conference, let's say hypothetically the ACC decides to merge with another conference, which conference would make more sense to you? The Big 12 or the Big 10? Like I said, they can go up the Atlantic coast and go into the Midwest, Ohio, Michigan, and all those states and stuff like that.
Well,
would it make more sense for them?
The Big 10, it's not even close.
You actually agree with me?
Yeah, it's not even debatable because of it's a better football conference than the Big 12 ever was, even with Oklahoma and Texas involved. So, number one, it's a better football product on the field, top to bottom. Number two, there's so much more money in the Big 10 versus the Big 12. It's not even comparable. The Big 10 is paying out more than twice as much money to each member school than the Big 12. Number three, look at all the major markets in Big 10 country. Chicago, Indianapolis, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Minneapolis, Milwaukee.
Penn State.
I'm listing television markets.
Oh, okay.
So those are the major television markets in Big Ten country. And then lastly, as you just mentioned, geographically, the Big Ten is somewhat connected to the ACC. The southern portion of the Big Ten in Pennsylvania, you have a connection to Virginia and those states in ACC territory. And obviously there's an overlap with Pitt and Penn State are right there. Now that the ACC in the last 10 years has ventured north, there's complete overlap in terms of territory. To grab the Big 12, obviously the ACC is leaping over the entire SEC to get to Texas and Oklahoma and Iowa.
But do you think it makes no sense, like in a sense, because the ACC, the SEC is going to have 12, 16 teams, but merging the ACC and the Big Ten is going to make it 24?
28.
Doing my math correctly?
28. So
2018.
the two biggest issues, and I'm sure there are others if I would sit down and think about it, with the ACC and the Big Ten merging would be, number one, what do you do with all these teams? Do you have a 28 team conference? That's ridiculous, even though that's being talked about.
The lower level teams. Actually, I have a solve for that. I'm not sure if you agree with this. Have the lower level teams, like the bottom feeders, move to the AAC and have them become more of a,
okay.
What is it called? A group of 5 teams.
You understand, as a conference, you can't dictate to another conference, hey, you're going to take our teams. It would be simply
let's say they agree. That's what I'm saying. If they, within the contract, they actually agree to allow some teams.
What contract?
Let's say
the contract would be between
Anthony.
Hang on just a second. The contract you're proposing is between the ACC and the Big Ten. They would just they don't care about the destination of the teams that they discard. The schools that they discard would be the schools. They're not going to be out there running around trying to find them a landing spot. They're just eliminating them is what they would do. And that, you talk about legal situations, I'm sure they would have to pay whatever the league bylaws say, not the bylaws, but the conditions concerning letting schools out of the conference, cutting schools out of the conference. We haven't seen that. We've seen schools leave conferences, but we haven't seen conferences kick schools out.
And do any of the ACC teams match up with the academic requirements of the Big Ten?
Yes. So not all of them. Not even close. Not even close to all of them. I know Virginia does. I know Georgia Tech does. Of course, Duke does. And those are not even the.
Would you say Miami?
I believe Miami does. Yeah, it's a good school. I believe it does. Don't hold me to that. I do definitely know that Duke, Georgia Tech, and Virginia do. North Carolina does. Yes, correct.
Yeah, and you know what? It actually, I can't remember who was talking about this, but
last point here, Anthony. I just need to take some other calls.
Okay.
What do you got?
And actually, this was brought up. They were saying that you have to, if something like this happens, you have to realize it benefits other sports. You have to look at the totality. It doesn't affect just football. Maybe basketball. If they bring, if the Big Ten brings in teams like Duke and North Carolina, that boosts their legitimacy. They have more blue blood programs in the league. Do you agree? You have to look at the totality of not just football, but other sports. Do you agree?
I don't agree that it makes that much difference. Yes, is men's basketball a factor? It's not even close to the factor it was 20 years ago, but it's still a factor. There's still money to be made, and the NCAA men's basketball tournament still brings in a ton of money, but nowhere close to what it was in terms of a ratings, television ratings draw 10 years ago. And I may be proven wrong, but the entire ACC merging with the entire Big Ten, unless this turns into a 2-conference country of college football, then, you're talking about, and then who controls this? Like if the Big Ten merges with the ACC, there's a power struggle right there. Is this a merger that the Big Ten is swallowing up the ACC, or the ACC, the Big Ten? What do they call this conference? So anyway, I don't think we're anywhere close to that. I know a lot of things.
The Big Atlantic Conference.
Yeah. All right, Anthony. Thank you so much for the call.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Our guy Anthony on the line, talking merger between the ACC and the Big Ten. All right, next call coming up. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Landtown.
Hey, Landfound. How you doing, man?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I'm good. What's
doing
up?
All right. I want to apologize to Nicosi Perry. I know better than to attack college kids. I think I said no go Perry one too many times. That was out of character for me, and that's my bad.
Well, that's a very stand-up thing for you to do. To say that, I didn't really catch you saying that. I may have just not heard it correctly. I thought you were referring to Nicosi Perry and didn't give him that nickname. So
no, that's fine. You know, I rely on you to keep me in bounds.
That missed on me. So anyway, Nicosi Perry. Okay. Yes, we don't want to disrespect anybody on here.
Hey, I got a take. Can I run it by you?
Sure.
Can I preface it, actually? All right. So, you remember the number 23? A movie that Jim Carrey starred in? The character he played, he was a man obsessed with numbers.
Number
right?
23?
Where he was writing.
I don't.
Yeah.
Number 23, Jim Carrey.
Well,
okay.
It was a man obsessed with, he played the character of a man obsessed with numbers, and it got to the point where it was so bad that he was shutting himself in his place and writing numbers all over the wall. I forgot what year it came out. I should have looked at it before I gave you a call.
Okay.
And I've watched you for some time, and here and there, you're a little bit tardy, but you're quick to apologize because, you have familial or church obligations, right? And as you know, in our faith, numbers have meaning. The number 3 represents the Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. The number 7 is the number of completedness and perfection, right? And the number 6 is the number of man.
Mm-hmm.
In Miami, the number 13 is sacred, especially for the quarterback position.
Sure.
Wearing 13, you're placing a set of expectations on yourself you will not fulfill. And I was scrolling through Twitter, haha, kiki. And Jake Garcia took pictures of himself with the number 13. Without hesitation, I tweeted at him. I said, right off the bat, you shouldn't be wearing that number. You're not Dan Marino, and you're in Miami.
Oh.
People replied to that post. I mean, it was like a backlash immediately. What does wearing 13 have to do anything with Marino? He played at Pittsburgh, right? I'm sure you're thinking the same thing, Mark.
I sure am.
Right, But this is why I get infuriated. And I got a kicker for you. Mark, there's a criteria to being a sports fan that I think you and I can agree with. The first one is you got to be born within 50 to 100 miles within the city. In Miami, now that number fluctuates, but in Miami's case, once you start getting around Tampa or Orlando, anything north of that, and you're repping the U, I start to look at you a little funny because I think to myself, hey, isn't Tallahassee and Gainesville like right there? So why are you repping the U? I've sometimes asked. And I've always gotten, oh no, I've just been a fan since the University of Miami ever since I was a kid, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm keeping an eye on you. And the second point is, you have to have at least gone to one sporting event. There's exceptions. I know there's exceptions to that. And my third point I think that we can agree on to be a sports fan is when we talk sports and I see you can't hold a conversation that you're just there to like celebrate with the winning team, then that's when I look at you and I say, this one's not a sports fan. He just wants to celebrate with the winning team, but that's cool. So what infuriates me about these guys that come from all over and claim that they're Miami Hurricane fans and rep the U, but in reality, they're fake fans or imposters or they're on the fence or they're con men. It infuriates me.
Land found.
Just so you know, Mark.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to square one real quick. You're all over the place. I think you have two issues here. I think you're raising two what you consider to be issues. Okay, I just want to follow this. Number one, Jake Garcia, University of Miami quarterback, went on social media and posted a picture of himself with a University of Miami number 13, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Not a Miami Dolphins. Just to clarify, this was not a Miami Dolphins number 13 jersey. It was a University of Miami. Okay. Do we know what Jake Garcia's number is going to be at the University of Miami? Is it going to be 13?
Yes. It was like.
So that's his number.
He was taking his yearly yearbook. He was taking like his yearly yearbook shot, and even Manny Diaz liked the photo, which I have an issue with.
Okay,
because Manny Diaz knows better.
This is his number. This is Jake Garcia's number at the University of Miami.
Mark, I'm going to give you something to think about as a sports fan.
Wasn't Gino Torretta number 13, correct? Was he 13?
Ooh. And who was the last person to wear the number 13 at the University of Miami?
I have no idea.
You beat me to the punch. Gino Torretta.
Was it Torretta?
Mark, and who was the last person?
So was that wrong for him to wear it? What's this have to do with Dan Marino? He played at the University of Pittsburgh.
If you let me, I'm going to tie it all together for you.
Okay.
So the last person to wear the number 13 at the University of Miami is Gino Torretta, a Heisman winning trophy quarterback, the only Heisman ever for UM in 1992, and he won a national championship. So those are big expectations to fill. Mark, that's the last person to wear 13 in Miami. Mark, when you're from Miami, 13 is sacred for the quarterback position. High school, college pros. Ja'Cory Harris, Northwestern, Ethnic Sands, Carroll City, I believe. They know better than to wear 13. Mark, I'm not mad at Jake Garcia. I'm concerned for him. I was a little, offended even. But I'm concerned for him because the expectations that he's putting on himself, and he knows what he's doing. He's sending a message. This is a conversation, an ongoing conversation in sports these days. These guys come in so polished with their social media expertise. They know how to send messages, Mark. And he's sending a message that he's going to win a national championship.
He's not sending any messages. He wears a number. Okay. Land found. I'm going to give the University of Miami a lot of credit here in terms of their football prowess since they became a dynasty in the early 80s. If you went through the University of Miami and eliminated every number of a great player, you wouldn't have any numbers to give out for anybody enrolling and playing currently on the football team. So Warren Sapp's numbers out. Right?
But okay.
Throw his Michael Irvin's numbers out.
We can go. We can do it.
Cleveland Gary. Right. Does who else do we go to? Where do we stop that? Who's is Craig Erickson's number out?
Mike Irvin, 47.
Yeah.
Right.
We get rid of these numbers.
Well, Mark,
how many numbers are there going to be?
Okay. You know well as I do as a sports fan that the quarterback position is often said is the most important position in all of sports.
Gino Toretto was
The
not a great
quarterback
quarterback.
position-
I don't care that he did win a Heisman. He was not a great quarterback. Landfound, we can't continue this conversation forever. I get your point. You don't like that Jake Garcia's got number 13. First of all, it's responsibility of the coaching staff as well to assign numbers. Every team, I'm sure, goes about that different ways. I think it's absolutely a non-factor, no big deal. He's got number 13. It's a number. Dan Marino played for a different school.
Really?
Let's go look up the Pitt roster.
Yeah,
I'm going to go online right now and look up the
Skipper.
Pittsburgh Panthers roster to see who wears number 13. We should be mad at him. Who's wearing?
Skipper, with all due respect, you're not from Miami.
I know I'm not from Miami. And you
I
know
don't
what?
know
Dan
or
Marino's
pretend to know
not even
anything.
from Miami.
But Dan Marino was a Miami Dolphin.
He was a Miami Dolphin. There's no connection between the Miami Hurricanes and the Miami Dolphins. Zero. None. That's like saying players at Northwestern are connected to the Chicago Bears. Or we don't even make a connection between the Pitt Panthers and the Pittsburgh Steelers.
You know what it sounds like? It sounds like you're defending the whole Miami fan base. That's what it sounds like.
I'm not
If you want me to be
defending
honest.
anything. I'm using
You're defending the
logic
whole
to
Miami
say
fan base
that there are numbers allotted to
because you think
players.
that I'm a crazy person.
I am telling you that there's
Mark,
no
that's-
connection
that's-
between.
I'm not calling the like who.
Here's
I'm
my
not
final
calling who you're
statement.
representing.
Here's my final statement, Landfound. Then I'm going to give you 10 seconds to respond. The final statement is there's no connection between Dan Marino and the Miami Hurricanes. Zero.
You're not from Miami, but 10
Zero. Dan Marino played
Jake
for
Garcia
a
could've done.
rival. He played for a rival.
Jake Garcia, Mark, since 1992, man, everybody respects 13 in Miami. There's a reason for it that nobody's worn 13 since Gino Toretto.
Well, Jake Garcia is wearing it.
There's a reason, Mark. You think, like I replied to somebody, oh, that's just a coincidence, right? That nobody's worn 13? It's just a coincidence.
Well, a lot of people think 13 is
You
an
know-
unlucky number, so maybe that's what happened there. I don't know.
Well,
All right. Thanks,
Mark,
Landfound.
last thing, I guess.
I always
Give me
appreciate
10
the
seconds.
call.
Are you got to take other callers?
Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. George is on the line. So we're waiting for somebody to bring some stability and some logic to the program. I turned to George for this. George, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm upset about this whole realignment thing, but
You are. Yet two more
Yeah, right.
teams in your conference.
I think we went the wrong way. I think we should have incorporated the ACC, kept it, more indigenous. Like if we're going to do Oklahoma and Texas, let's throw in Oregon, Washington State, and USC. I mean, that's ridiculous. They don't belong in our league. They had their chance. We offered Miami to join an FSU once, and they said no. Well, what's going on? It's ESPN. They have no business no more. They fired everybody they can fire. And they're like, we'll just take over the whole college football sports world. Maybe they got Disney and ABC involved. I don't know. Horrible.
So you don't want Texas
That's my
and
segue
Oklahoma.
from
You
the-
would have gone after some other.
Yeah. Something fun, something reasonable. Like if FSU and Miami would have said, please let us in. We'd have said, well, shit, you're right here already anyway. Maybe UCF, North Carolina, Clemson. Like we're all in each other's backyard, Texas and Oklahoma, if they want to play us, get to the playoffs and play us.
They don't want to play you. They want to be in the conference and make more money.
Yeah, see, that's the problem right there. That's, yeah, something wrong with this. Hey, listen, Mark, tell me if I'm lying or not, right? Any coach can sit down with any player now and say, I have Fritzy's Burgers lined up for $4,000 a year, That Boys for $600 a year, and Billy Bob's Dance Club for $20,000 a year, right? You can do that now, right? Say, we've got 7 NIL contracts ready for you if you want to sign with us, right?
Sure.
What if
It's wide
Nike
open.
wants to sponsor you and give? What if Nike wants to give every player they want to recruit for Oregon $300 million a year lifetime contract? Is that legal? Because Nike does that kind of shit. It has to be in the regular course of business, and that's what Nike does. You know, I predict Oregon wins the national championship real soon. Yeah. You can
they've
be
got
our
that connection.
spokesman.
They've got that connection. We shall see. We shall see.
Right.
I would love somebody to verify in the chat whether any players at Miami have worn number 13 since Gino Torretta. Somebody stated that.
He forgot to find the square root of 13. He's missing the whole numerology thing. I was trying to segue away from that guy.
Yeah.
Unless he does really big super chats, in which case I will entertain the whole idea.
No, I was just too kind there. Too kind. What else is going on, George?
So we're gonna
Yes.
we're gonna have two conferences. Is what it's going to come out to. There's going to be like 30 teams in each conference. It's going to be the AFC versus the NFC. And we're going to have a playoff, and we're going to have a national championship. That's what they're doing. You can see the handwriting on the wall. And anybody that doesn't get into those conferences, you're called the developmental league. And we will coach your players as we see fit. If we need to call somebody up, you know. Is that not true? Is that not what they're doing? Making 2 super leagues, NFC, AFC?
I have no guess in all this. I've got about 5 or 6 ways I've cooked up that it could go. And if it happens any other way, I'll be surprised. But after what just happened with Oklahoma and Texas and their talk of like supposedly legitimate talk of the Big Ten going out and grabbing USC, UCLA, or those type of deals happening, man, all bets are off.
East versus West, basically. And anyone that doesn't get in, Montana State's Wyoming, you can still have your teams and leagues, and you'll get your little minor NIL shit for your players, but you're not going to be on a big stage. And it's good for them, you know, good for the kids. They still get a little bit. But you're a developmental league, you know. You just admit you're never going nowhere because there's these 2 conferences with 24 teams in each one, or whatever it is, 30. Who knows? You know what happened, right? You saw the timing on this. They announced, yes, you can do name, image, likeness, right? And then instantly we're going to change the game of football because they're not letting these kids get paid nothing. There's going to be certain kids that get big bucks. Everyone else is going to get thrown into the pool and get a split of it. But they're not going to let these kids make money randomly. If they left it all the way it is right now, you know how many kids would be getting big contracts? But they got to shut it down right away. You know, it's all our money. It's all TV money. Because if they left it alone the way it is, there'd be a lot of kids and a lot of conferences getting contracts from Jack's Happy Burger or whatever. But they're going to make it all international, national, where only Nike matters and Coca-Cola matters, you know, or a Mercedes dealership or something. It won't be like Jimmy John's barbecue getting advertised on TV.
Okay. What's the point, George? I'm not hearing a point in all this.
Get away from the last phone call.
Okay. All right, George.
Trying to get away from the last phone call. I think that was a good segue.
We have some other ones lined up. All right, George.
You got somebody on hold?
Appreciate it. Many.
Let's get out here.
Many.
See you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Who do we have lined up here? I can't always trust the voice recognition. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
This is Sebastian.
Sebastian, how you doing? See, I can't trust the voice recognition. I got Ashton is what it's telling me. Sebastian, good to hear from you.
Nah.
What's up?
Yeah, I would have slit my wrist if my parents named me Ashton. Let's see. I haven't heard people talk about this, but just a couple of months ago, it was reported how the Big 12 invited Fox Sports to negotiate their next media contract, and Fox Sports said, declined. I think right now Fox Sports is in a weird financial situation. Like all the media entities doubled the amount they're paying to the NFL, right? Fox Sports went from paying like $1.3 billion to air Sunday afternoon games to more than $2 billion, and they couldn't even renew their Thursday night contract. And the amount that they're paying to the Pac-12, the Big Ten, and to the Big 12, I think it's putting them in a bind. Not only that, but I think all cable sports channels, they're going through a transition right now. And I think it's a correction because they're losing subscribers, and it's accelerating because of cord cutters and, of course, last year's pandemic. Not only that, but like Fox Sports, they're shorted like last year by the Big Ten, 12 games. And then to the Pac-12, I think they were shorted like 16 games that they couldn't air, but I think they still gave the full payout for that. But they lost all that ad revenue. But why aren't people talking about this? Is my question.
Talking about, well, the last portion of that, I think, was pretty much assumed by anybody that follows beyond just watching the football on the field that, there were tons of games missed. All the big non-conference games were missed, and there were actually conference games. I don't know what the final total was. I was keeping track for quite some time in regards to how many games missed per week, but the average team, the Pac-12 was only playing 4 and 5 games per team. But I would say the average team across the nation in the Power 64 played 7 games out of 12. There was roughly only about 60% of the season was played. So now there were the majority of bowl games played, and then the college football playoff obviously is disproportionate in terms of ad sales and the revenue brought in. But I never heard any information on this, but having worked in the field and knowing how things work, I thought that ESPN, other networks, Fox, everyone would be paying back the advertisers because there's always an estimate sales revenue bar that's set, and then if the rating doesn't live up to, or the delivered audience to the estimation, then there are conditions made. Either they send money back or they give them extra spots or whatever the deal is. So what's your point?
We're talking about 100. Yeah.
Yep.
That Fox Sports isn't in a position to offer 3 different conferences the amount of money that they were paying out before, because one, their source of revenue, some of the subscribers is decreasing, and the amount they're paying out to their best revenue content generator, I should say, is the NFL, and they're paying double for that. I don't think it's a coincidence that Fox Sports wasn't willing to negotiate the next media rights contract with the Big 12, and I think that there's some hesitation with the Pac-12 as well. I mean, I think it's going to benefit in the long run the Big 10, but I think it's huge. Not only that, ESPN went from having more than 100 million subscribers in 2011, and there's estimates. Well, Nielsen said, at the beginning in January 2020, they had like 77 million subscribers, right?
Yeah, it's a huge.
Sorry about that. 82 million subscribers. Yeah, but in the past 2 years, conservative estimates are saying by the end of this year, it's going to be 25 million. Sorry about that, 75 million. So that's, a drop of 25 million or 1/4 of their
Mhm.
subscribers. And I know Fox News or Fox Sports isn't anywhere near that. That's billions that they're losing. I know ad revenue is only what, 1/4 of their total revenue, at least for Fox Sports. I don't know about ESPN.
Yeah.
Can you off that out?
I think most
Fill out
people would think
yeah.
that most of the money is generated on television through ad revenue, but basically what happens is that ESPN and other networks sell their channels to the cable companies, so the cable companies buy them, and a typical rate is that they pay a CNN 60 or 75 cents per subscriber, or per subscriber is paying 75 cents for CNN. The ESPN is by far the largest amount of money that each subscriber, regardless of what they watch, they may not even pay attention to ESPN, but each subscriber is paying for ESPN technically, and therefore ESPN is making that amount of money from the cable companies for those subscribers. So that's most of their money is set in stone. They have a set amount of money that they can count on, knowing, okay, we've got in 2011, as you mentioned, 102 million subscribers. Therefore, do the math. It's about $7 per subscriber. So we just made $700 million per month, and that's been chewed up to about 75% of that total, which is now ESPN and others have also gone in other routes to make money since then, but I doubt if it's made up for that type of loss.
Yeah, that's what ESPN is doing. They went to ESPN Plus.
Yeah.
Right. But they can't offer the same content without voiding the contract they have with the cable providers. They have to offer different content through ESPN Plus. But the other thing is, I know they're trying to bump up their rate. I think we're all paying $7 a month for, or maybe it's a little bit more than $7 a month for ESPN every month. But it's going to go up to $8.40 next year. But that's, that is more incentive for people to cut the cord, right? But Fox Sports is in a weird, it's in some financial situation right now. They have $47.5 billion in obligations on their books right now, and their market cap, and I think it's the market cap for all of Fox Corporation, not just Fox Sports. The market cap is only $24 billion, and that includes like baseball, NASCAR, WWE, NFL, and the college conferences, of course. And when your subscriber total is decreasing, they're in a financial bind, and I don't think they're able to come to the table with the Big 12. And I think it's going to be the same way with the Pac-12. I wish other people were talking about it, but maybe it reveals the situation that they're in at ESPN and Fox Sports and NBC Sports Network. And there was another one, but those three, I know the financial situation they're in. There's, the layoffs that are happening at all of them have made headlines. But
sure,
yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Oh, and I know ESPN, the ex-CFO, I wish I knew his name offhand, said that if ESPN's subscriber total drops below 50 million, that their business model doesn't work anymore. Then I don't know if you had insight into that or not.
Well, the catch-22 for ESPN is that, for years and years and years, the cable model worked for them above anybody else. And that's why it's incredible to think that they've been able to charge, let's say, more than 10 times as much as a CNN. That's how much their product is valued by the cable companies and by the people that watch sports, of course. But once digital took over and people started finding other options, not just for sports, but for entertainment, Netflix, YouTube, all these other things going online, and the number started to decrease. Well, the tricky portion was ESPN had built a cable model, and they started to venture off into trying to bridge the gap with all the digital platforms and everything. But to try to make, it was like if they could have erased what they had previously done and jumped straight from the cable model to direct consumer line where they can directly deal with the consumer. But, they'd have to tank the current model, which is the bulk of the TV revenue, like 80%. Then that's where the tricky transition that they're trying to make right now. They are trying to wean themselves off the cable model through digital and everything else that they're offering now, but hang on to the cable model as long as possible, because even at a decreased limit, you just cited the numbers, 75 million cable subscribers at what's going to be $8+ next year. $8 times 75 million, you're still talking about what, $600 million a month that ESPN is making from the cable companies, from us. How do you transition off of that when that's the bulk of your money? I don't know about the 50 million figure. It seems I understand. There is a tipping point there that they've been trying to manage. I don't think they foresaw this in time. I can speak from my own personal experience and some of the conversations I had there, and was privy to information and also how they dealt with me. I don't think they got on board with the digital model early enough, but they certainly, the company's not going to go away. The linchpin in all this that is saved the networks is the broadcasting rights of the games. As long as they own the games, the games are going to outrate any studio show by a million. So that's what people want. They want access to be able to watch the games. What could be difficult for these networks is if Amazon and Netflix, if they get involved, YouTube get involved in actually purchasing games from the leagues, then there's going to be big trouble. Because that's what ESPN's got right now. That's what ESPN's got right now, is that they own the rights to the leagues. They got all the major sports, and they got college football. They own college football. And so they're not in serious trouble for a long time, but 10 or 15 years from now, it might be a different landscape. As the previous caller had mentioned, these contracts come up in the next few years, and there's a reason they don't all come up at the same time. ESPN wouldn't negotiate their Big Ten, SEC on down the road, all the contracts to come due at the same time, because they're budgeting and they're controlling their costs. So they don't want to be negotiating everybody. So all of them are staggered for a reason, in addition to what they have to deal with the NFL and Major League Baseball and the NBA.
Yeah, that's a great point. I did not think about that. Do you think this is the reason why the ACC signed such a contract? Hey, let's just make sure our product is out there, and let's a long enough contract to write out this period that's coming that they somebody warned them about, or maybe they foresaw.
I'm sorry, I'm missing ACC. What contract?
Their TV contract is pretty bad compared to the other conferences, but it's for a long duration that they can write out this transition period that seems that it's going to affect the Pac-12 and the Big 12.
Well, yeah, that's a good point, because it's just like anytime you see a professional athlete sign a long-term contract, what's on the table: 5 years, 25 million, or 10 years, doing the math, 40 million. Do you give up either more money for security long-term? There's the balancing act of that's in play right there. For some reason, and I never knew the answer to this, ESPN was able to roll out the SEC network to rave reviews. And I'm not talking from a production and entertainment standpoint, but in regards to from a business model, they got like 85 million households signed up out of the gate. Got the cable companies on board, got it all lined up. The SEC was a huge success out of the gate in 2014, I think was the year. Here we are a couple years later. I believe the ACC must have launched in maybe 2019 would be my guess. I should know these things. I was right there for it. But I don't remember the numbers, but they were more in the 15 or 18 million range. Not nearly did they gain the homes. Some of that had to do with the deteriorating cable model, but also just they weren't as effective in selling the ACC network to those cable companies, probably because football's king. And
there were two cable companies that that they weren't able to come to agreement with. One was Comcast, and one was another like Frontier or something like that. That supposedly this new commissioner that they have is able to have them agree to carry the ACC network now. So they think they're going to increase the number of subscribers. But yeah, nowhere near the SEC. Yeah.
Interesting stuff.
Thanks a lot, Mark.
We appreciate the call. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Okay.
All right. More calls coming in here at the Voice of College Football. Let's see. We got Michael Black. Name sounds roughly, vaguely familiar. Michael, what's going on?
What's up, my man?
This is our guy on our Oregon live shows over on the Oregon channel. Michael Black with Fifth Quarter College Football. Good stuff. Michael, what's going on tonight?
Not a whole lot. I just popped into your show and see it was a call-in show, so I decided I'd call in.
What you got for us?
So just a slight continuation on what you guys were talking about last when it comes to TV deals. I would not be surprised to see the Pac-12 sell their TV rights, either Amazon or YouTube, to try and take that gamble to put themselves ahead of the game in a sense, because they've been behind in a lot of things. The Pac-12 network got off to a really solid start, but then Larry Scott fired almost the entire staff that we had there, and it just completely tanked the Pac-12 network and ruined it. Now we're building that back up slowly, and our TV rights deal is the next one to come up of the major conferences. And the new commissioner, I have a lot of faith in him so far, and I think it'll be really good for the Pac-12 to do something with Amazon or YouTube with how fast those platforms are going and how fast cable is declining.
Yes, the new Pac-12 commissioner was a curious hire, but may turn out to be a very savvy hire in that he is forward-thinking. He has an entertainment mind and savvy and sense about him, and he just comes across as a guy that's thinking the future and thinking entertainment and thinking of this as an entertainment product as well as athletic programs and institutions. And I got to think that he's, that might be the big breakthrough for the Pac-12. And I would not be surprised in what you just stated, because I had thought of that overall, as I just stated to the previous caller about, the Amazons and Netflix and YouTube's getting involved in sports and trying to take up some of these rights and becoming a major player in this. We've already seen, who was it? Just here in the last few years now, the NFL has broadcast a game every maybe 3 or 4 weeks. They'll throw on Facebook or
Twitch.
Somewhere else, Twitch. That we'll have to run to go see some of these games in England. And so I think this is the forerunner, and I think you make a great point that the Pac-12 could be thinking, okay, how do we catch up on this and actually become a forerunner? No, it's a great point.
And really, once you get the TV deals fixed, that heals. Believe it or not, that heals a lot of the issues that the Pac-12 has had lately. A lot of the issues have been budgeting, and they're not getting the same revenue shares that the other Power 5 teams are getting. And it's not hurt the Oregons and USCs of the world, but the Washington States, the Oregon States, the Cal Berkeleys of the world haven't had as much to put into their football program because of the TV deal being so bad and the ratings being lower, just because of everything that our last commissioner fumbled. Maybe it wasn't just his fault, but he was the face of it. He got the blame for it. And a lot of the deals we all really messed up. And I think once we get this deal sorted out, I think perception of the Pac-12 can start to finally turn around. The Pac-12 hasn't had bad football. It's just the top of the Pac-12 hasn't been on par with the top of the rest of the country. Mid to bottom of the Pac-12, I would argue, is one of the best in the country.
Agreed. Yeah, if you line up the Pac-12 in a typical year, and I used to do these conference comparisons every off season and still do. And only reason because we didn't have non-conference games last year is the Pac-12 has played exceptional football from the first time I started watching football in the late 70s up until, yes, it's deteriorated. But again, you're completely right. The Pac-12 going 6, 8, 9 deep has been just as good as everybody else. It's been everybody's focused on the top 2 or 3.
Exactly. And especially with the name, image, and likeness, there's a lot of money in a lot of these programs. Stanford, everybody knows who Stanford is. Oregon is obviously Nike University. A lot of people have read that book. USC is USC. There's not much to say about that. UCLA has their basketball money as well as being in the heart of Los Angeles. I think with everything going on in the modern era of college football, yeah, maybe it looks bleak for the Pac-12 now, but moving forward, they have a lot of leverage to play with and position themselves well, like we saw, and also to link back to your earlier conversation with the name, image, likeness, with a deal that Kayvon Thibodeau did with Phil Knight and Tinker Hatfield with the NFT.
Yep.
There's a lot of deals in these big market schools for the top players. Obviously, not every player is going to get it. Anyone who thinks every player is going to get these deals is just overblowing this 100%, not even close. But the possibility of getting those deals is why USC and Oregon are starting to keep a lot of this talent home. Oregon and USC are recruiting somewhere near the top of the country now. Oregon just took a 5-star tackle out of Texas. That never happened. So I don't know how the Pac-12 would be in a negative spot when they're turning, like when it's clear, there's clear signs of them turning it around, starting to steal some players out of places they never do and starting to keep more of their guys home. Corey Foreman stayed at USC.
What I would like to see, Mike, I would like to see a distribution of television viewers in each time zone, because we go through this all the time with the Pac-12 in regards to the inherent disadvantage of playing on the West Coast. And everybody is so Eastern time zone driven in their thoughts of when games should be played. And I don't know if you heard a call I had, 45 minutes ago, and I was explaining the inherent issue that the Pac-12 has, and they're always going to have it. It just is. They just need to manage it better. And that's that if they play primetime games locally, and so for your fans that are most interested, if Oregon's playing a huge game against USC, the people that are most engaged in that event obviously live in Oregon and California. And so you want to make it a primetime game for them at 8 o'clock at night, but you don't want that game kicking off at 11 o'clock at night on the East Coast. So do you play at 5 in the afternoon? You have to have some games in prime time in the Pac-12, and those are typically those games, those Washington State Cal games that we watch on FS1 or on ESPN2 at 11 o'clock at night on the East Coast. But it is an inherent disadvantage that they have to try to manage.
Yes, 100%. But despite that, you have, like, just today, Greg Biggins said that Oregon leads for the number 2 player out of the state of Florida in 2023. They just landed Kelvin Banks, obviously, I think the number 2 player out of Texas in 2022. So despite all that, they still looked to be in a good spot. However, that is going to be an odd scheduling, and it's going to be tough for fans. But I think the teams in the Pac-12 have already shown where they stand on that. Oregon is playing Ohio State at noon. They're not playing them anywhere near a primetime slot for the West Coast. They're playing them when the rest of the country can see them, and they can show that they're a good football team and that they can compete with anybody. When they played Auburn, it wasn't in a primetime West Coast spot. When they play their big games, as much as the Oregon fans and Pac-12 fans won't like it, they're going to be playing them in the East Coast primetime spots because they want that perception to change and they want to get that national recognition, because ultimately their goal is to make the playoffs and win the national championship.
Jason's got a comment here in the live chat that he can't imagine a kid from the West Coast going to schools in the SEC. There's no way I would choose Tuscaloosa, Alabama over Tempe, Arizona, or Los Angeles. But Jason, that's exactly what's happening, though, is that a lot of kids are leaving California and going to the SEC and going elsewhere. So what we consider as adults of places we would want to live isn't necessarily the choices that 18-year-olds are making just for 3 years on a campus.
Yeah, and to be honest, if I was a college football recruit, I'd be hard-pressed not to go to Tuscaloosa. I love my Ducks, but there is, I don't know if there's much of me that could keep myself from going to play for Nick Saban if that opportunity came. And it's not just Tuscaloosa. It's not just Alabama. these kids love some of these coaches. Some of the best coaches out west or out in the country are out east. And now the Pac-12 is finally starting to rebuild their coaching staff, and they're starting to get some of these quality coaching staffs. But you have Lane Kiffin out east. I would love to play for him if I was a player. You have Nick Saban out east. I would love to play for him if I was a player. Dan Mullen, Kirby Smart, all of these guys, all of these coaches who know how to recruit are out east. And the Pac-12 is now playing catch-up. They got Mario Cristobal who can recruit. Clay Helton added some staff who can recruit. Maybe Jimmy Lake's going to add some staff who can recruit. Herm Edwards has improved in recruiting. It's just been having the right guys in place to focus on recruiting. The Pac-12 got away for so long because of guys like Chip Kelly was not having to pull guys from out of the West Coast. But now they have to. Scheme alone is not going to win it for them. They need some of the talent. You're not going to beat teams who out-talent you multiple times a year. So now that they're focusing on that, it's starting to show that they can pull some of these guys and they can start keeping their guys home. And as the years go on, I think more and more guys are going to stay in Los Angeles. More and more guys are going to stay out west, and they might steal more and more guys out east. There is a lot more talent out east, so obviously it's easier to steal. And I think the opportunity is there for the Pac-12.
All right, Mike, appreciate the call. I'm going to move on to some of these other calls coming in, and we'll certainly put together an Oregon live show here soon.
Yes, sir. I can't wait. And thanks for having me again.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. That was our guy, Michael Black. He writes for Fifth Quarter College Football. You can join him. I don't exactly have his Twitter handle on me, but if you follow me, then you can see my followers and who I follow. And Michael and I are connected on Twitter. And Michael helps us out as a lead analyst on our Oregon live show that we've posted 5 or 6 times. So please check us out on the Oregon channel for the Voice of College Football. I got David Greenshield on the line. We'll see what David's got for us tonight.
The man that gives college football its voice, the great Mark Rogers. Hi, and how are you, sir?
Thank you, David. Appreciate you jumping on the line. I'm doing well. How are you?
Excellent. Just trying to sift through all the madness that is the ever-changing world of college football this week. Got a chance to listen to you on Steve Bass's podcast, listen to the Ohio State cast today, kind of because we didn't get a chance to the last time we spoke. I know I talked about the situation of maybe trying the Big Ten looking at, Notre Dame as a possibility, which I don't think is a real possibility for the Big Ten, just as far as where, their conference allegiance already is in other sports and still their desire to be an independent, at least for now. But I did find it interesting. I heard Tony talk about it. I've heard Noon talk about it. And obviously it's been brought up as far as the Pac-12 goes. And I want to kind of go down that road, if I can, with you here and talk to you a little bit about that as a possibility. I talked about it with Uncle Lou last night, and he seems to think actually it would benefit the Pac-12 more than the Big Ten. I actually think it could have definitely helped both conferences in a lot of ways. What do you think about it? How realistic do you think it is? Is it even plausible to see the two conferences coming together? Although I guess anything is possible nowadays, right, Mark?
It seems like it. So if you're talking about a complete combining of conferences to make some massive conference, you're talking about 12 and 14, 26 schools coming together. All right. So the natural relationship between the Big Ten and the Pac-12, I see as two-sided. Of course, the Rose Bowl has united the conferences forever. And because of that, there was always a synergy between the two conferences in scheduling non-conference games. And then also academically, they're very much in sync and in tune to what is important academically and setting and keeping those standards. In terms of a football partnership, that is just a straight out merge, then you get it gets clumsy in trying to determine how that would work. I know Tony had talked about putting together some type of pod system.
Yeah.
That would involve only traveling, certain schools across the pods at certain points. Of course, they play the majority of the collection of games in their own area of the country, and would only make those trips, a couple times a year, and maybe even play schools if the scheduling can be worked out. Michigan State on the same trip, back-to-back weeks, that sort of thing.
Right.
I think from the standpoint of the where things stand right now, it benefits the Pac-12 more financially and in terms of football clout. The way the population is shifting for future generations, it should help the Big Ten, and also gets them into a massive recruiting state in California, because, of course, the California's had its better days, and we'll see if the social issues and everything, and it's able to handle that and bounce back. But it's still just a massive population, massive economy, and a great get for the Big Ten to attach itself to to California in a world that's becoming in a country that's becoming migrant to the South and the West, and the Big Ten could kind of keep a lifeline there. So I think it's mutually benefiting, but the Big Ten makes a whole lot more money, has more football clout, has more just football status on the field, and the Pac-12, I think, serves in the ways that I just outlined. So I think it's just clumsy, just geographically, but otherwise it works for both leagues. And if you really think that the SEC has a bent toward monopolizing the sport and really dominating the sports, then maybe the two should act.
Well, here's the bottom line. I'm going to make a couple of points. First of all, to kind of the points you just made right off the top of the bat. First of all, I think we talked about this before. I mean, this is becoming, we used to talk about college football being regionalized. To me right now, Mark, it's college football without borders. Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't matter anymore. We're becoming a free-for-all here. So, and by the way, when it comes to the Big Ten, what's the travel between Nebraska and Rutgers like?
Sure.
I mean, that's not exactly a short trip. So, you can look at that as well. I would also say to your SEC point, and I said this to Uncle Lou last night on his show. I mean, the SEC's, bringing a flamethrower. You got to strike back. You got to fight fire with fire here. I mean, we talked about this last year, and you made a really good point, I think, on the Buckeye show. You kind of saw, you had a glimpse into, how these sports felt about college football when we went through the COVID situation last year. And we talked about that ad nauseum, and, what conferences showed that they were dedicated to it and behind it and willing to move forward, and how clumsy the Big Ten was about it. So we saw a glimpse of that. And this is yet another glimpse of that, Mark. And I think you talked about that on the Buckeye show today. This is Sankey and the SEC making a power move to overall strengthen their conference and make it more dominant. Now, I do wonder with Texas, as we talked about before, they're having a hard time winning 7 or 8 games in the Big 12. How are you going to like your life in the SEC? So, I wonder how good of a Texas program they're getting. But as Dace had mentioned, they're a cash cow. They are a cash cow of a program. They may not be a great winning program, but they make a ton of dough. So, I mean, I do think that if you're the Big Ten, I mean, again, you have to. Now, you're right. They are conservative, Mark. But to me, this comes back to, and I'm going to make 2 points here. Number one, well, actually 2 kind of questions as far as that goes. Number one, Warren's leadership, obviously after last year, I have very little confidence in it. And I think you do too. And you can address that. And then the second point is, and I don't know if you've talked to your Pac-12 people, and I know you've had a fair amount of Pac-12 people on there. Have you also gotten a feel of what they would think of something like this?
Yeah. So Yeah, the Big Ten historically has been conservative. Of course, there is a change constantly in leadership and people who are involved. And I think that that there is the biggest gap and biggest opposing priority systems within that conference, as opposed to the other leagues that are very united in how they think and approach athletics versus academics. In the Big Ten, there's a gap between the academia and the rest of it. In addition to talking, let's see, Tony Siracusa came on earlier tonight. We didn't really talk about the Pac-12 and what the possibilities are, aside from he just discounted the Pac-12's interest in some of these leftover schools in the Big 12, Big 8, that they're not attractive for a number of reasons. Academically, they don't bring television markets to the Pac-12, and he doesn't believe that the Pac-12 is going to expand in that sort of way just to add teams, add football programs. But he sees it more as they're going to go big if they're going to go in any such way. And it even seemed that way to the guys today, Kevin, Steve, and Tony, that they don't think that the Big Ten is going to just try to match the SEC from a quantity standpoint. They're going to go after it big if they do anything at all. I don't know if that answers your question. I kind of lost track of your questions to a certain extent.
No. I mean, you kind of gave me an idea of, what I was thinking here and where I was going with this. I mean, I just, well, number one, as I just said, I'm concerned about the Big Ten's leadership, obviously, after what happened last year. I know that we've talked about in the past, how much does football really matter out in the Pac-12 was the conversation we had about a year ago. And I know that you say that it's kind of like the Big Ten. There are certain pockets in the Pac-12 where it matters more to certain schools than other schools, and I also feel the other thing too with the Big Ten and the Pac-12, the other point I was going to make, and I think you also saw this last year, that I think that the ideology, and I think you know what I mean by ideology, of the presidents in the Pac-12 and the Big Ten are very, very similar, if not carbon copies. Do you think that's a fair statement? I don't think I'm going out on a limb there. Do you think so, Mark?
Yes, but what we saw last year that I alluded to was that the Pac-12 doesn't serve a fan base that's as fervent, therefore, and as large in number as the Big Ten does. That is the reason we saw the behavior in each conference line up with the decision initially made. So for the other three, meaning SEC most fervently and strongly, and then the ACC next, and then the Big 12 followed once they saw those two going in one direction, where the Pac-12 was on the other end of the spectrum. You saw this just conflict between the academia and everybody else. I will call them the working class, coaches, players, fans, parents in the Big Ten. So it's not a fully united front there in the Big Ten. For as successful as, look at the Big Ten when it comes to, people are fearing that Ohio State and Michigan are going to go to the SEC. Well, the Big Ten, as things stand right now, is making as much money as the SEC and is just as powerful from a standpoint of a business as the SEC is right now.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and dollars are the motivator. Obviously, dollars were the motivator behind, the SEC, getting, Texas and Oklahoma, and I get that. But, I mean, obviously, you're going to have one conference disintegrate here in the Big 12. I mean, I don't know if the powers that be would make that move with the Pac-12, and I don't know if both conferences' presidents can get that to align. One point that Lou made, it would be interesting, Mark, is if it did happen, just let's say, for the sake of argument, it did, wouldn't that then force the ACC's hand at that point? because we couldn't just be left out with, the Big 12 and Pac-12 forming some type of bigger super conference. The SEC, sucking up, Oklahoma and Texas, and then the Big 12 left for dust, and then the ACC's just out there by its lonesome at that point.
Well, yeah, there's going to have to be some. Right now, we have 3 14-team conferences, a 12 and a 10. Okay, we already know that's going to change, but could we possibly have a 16? And then I just don't see a straight merger between the Big 10 and the Pac-12. And we may run this back in 6 months and say Mark's an idiot because it's going crazy. And maybe we've got 32-team conferences, but that's 26 teams playing. And I don't think, again, because of the academic portion of this and the more level-headed approach to it rather than just a football cutthroat approach, I don't see the Pac-12 and the Big 10 getting together and saying we're going to keep all our best football school. They just don't think like that. They don't make moves like that. They're not in a desperate mode here, even though some of the football fans are in desperation mode, just wanting to compete to be the best conference. They're not all hell-bent on we need to be the best conference in college football. They want to make money for the university and, represent the university and maintain these TV contracts and have it run as a business. So to put together 26 schools to play in all sports, including football, or even if it's just a football thing, man, I just, again, I might be proven wrong. I just don't see it headed in that direction.
Well,
but if it did, I guess I'll finish my thought because you took it there, that if it did go in that direction, then you got the ACC. How do you have a 16-team conference, a 26-team conference, and then you get the ACC who could pick up Notre Dame, Cincinnati, West Virginia, UCF, maybe they bulk up to 18 to 20 teams, and then you get this. Do you go on with college football with a 26-team conference and a 20-team and a 16-team? There you go. I don't know. I guess they're operating now between 10 and 14 teams, not why not between 16 and 26?
Hey, I mean, all the rules seem to have been thrown asunder here, Mark. So, I mean, all these things that we put out here, I think, I don't think are outside the realm of possibility. I think the one thing, if the Pac-12 and the Big 10 did some kind of a merger and did the pods and, kind of what Tony was talking about on the Buckeye podcast today, what about them meeting in between a Jerry World for the championship game?
Yeah. So when I think of the Big 10 and the Pac-12 getting together, aside from them doing a straight merge, I just don't understand what I've heard about them just kind of forming some type of united front, syncing their scheduling together, those sorts of things. I just don't see how that presents itself in such a way if they're still playing as separate conferences. I don't. Everybody's still out there scheduling non-conference games against the other Power 5 conferences, so I'm not grasping what that would accomplish.
Well, I mean, my only thought is that, I tend to agree with Tony. I think that's the best option for the Big Ten, because just picking up the leftover Big 12 schools and doing something like that is, I don't know. I'm looking for programs that can help move the needle here. And the Big Ten in the past has gotten us a Nebraska program that's not the Nebraska of yesteryear, and a Rutgers and Maryland program that really haven't done a whole lot for this conference. Particularly in college football, I should say. So, I mean, I just don't know if the powers that be on both sides can make it happen. But, it would be good to see us try as a conference to be a little bit more aggressive, especially with the power plays the SEC are making right now. I agree with a lot of what Steve said. that, maybe they'll just see this as an isolated incident and stay pat. But I can only hope. I just want the Big Ten to be as strong a football conference as they can possibly be. I understand the SEC has advantages because of the population shift, and a lot of folks have moved south, and we've talked about that ad nauseum in the past, and the folks in the south know that because more people have moved in that direction over the last years, which gives them more talent than used to be, let's say in the 90s or even early 2000s, when it was a little bit more debatable. But I mean, I just would like to see the conference be aggressive. I don't know if they will, but time will tell.
I don't know who else is talking as much about UCF as I am. I just see them as a hidden gem in all this, that I would, if I were the ACC, I would definitely go after UCF. They're
solid. They're a solid program. I don't doubt that.
And there are so many advantages, so many pluses to grabbing that Florida market. And if all geographic regions are going to be blown apart, I would even consider it if I was the Big Ten, going down to Florida and grabbing UCF. And the only hesitation I would have there is there's no connection there geographically, no one to bring them. There's a crazy rumor about the Big Ten going out and poaching USC and UCLA away from the Pac-12. I don't think that's going to happen because I just don't see the Big Ten's not that cutthroat, at least with a conference that they've had this relationship with over the years. But again, UCF to me is a school that would be attractive to me if I was the ACC in particular.
Yeah. I mean, I think UCF and I still think Cincinnati's attractive. I still think that's a solid program, and at the very least, a top 20 type program, maybe even top 15 type program. I think they can, continue to be very, very competitive. So, I mean, now, could you see them joining a major conference, Mark, or do you think that they're in play as well?
I would think that they're in play. Of course, the Big Ten works geographically. Well, now that the ACC is all over the place too, Louisville's right down the road. So Cincinnati's in play. Pittsburgh's in the conference. So I guess if the ACC is going to expand by 2, it's most likely going to be West Virginia and fill in the blank. Is that UCF? Is that Cincinnati? So based on what I heard, I know that Tony made the comment the other day when Cincinnati was brought up, Ohio State's going to say over our dead body.
Yeah. Well, everybody doesn't want any type of competition. I would obviously be fervently opposed to Iowa State, as we've talked about too. So, I don't think that the Hawkeyes would be crazy to see the Cyclones come to the Big Ten either. So,
absolutely.
Well, it is a crazy college football world, and I'm going to continue to watch Mark Rogers to get more and more knowledge about it.
Thank you so much, David. We always appreciate your call, sir.
Take care of yourself now. Bye-bye.
Good night. All right. Let's pick off some of these other calls. I believe we've got Colton calling in here. Welcome to the Voice of College Football.
Hey, can you hear me?
We got you. How you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good. So just real quick, I just kind of had 2 questions, and I apologize if you kind of referred to them before. I just kind of tuned in and want to say about a half hour ago, just been waiting. But so my first question is concerning Boise State. So I grew up in Boise. Haven't necessarily been watching them a whole lot these past couple of years, but ever since I saw the conference alignment was coming back up, I kind of thought maybe they might, I don't know, have an opportunity to move up, because I know that a lot of Bronco fans, especially back around 2010, I want to say it was, where they got an invite to go to the Big East before it imploded, and then
yes,
then we were in the Mountain West, and we were just we were well, I mean, at least we can build up the Mountain West, and then next thing we know, Utah and TCU leave, and then BYU goes independent. And so it was just like, turned out to just be like a depleted like Mountain West after that. And so I don't know, there's just like a lot of Bronco fans that I know are just not necessarily like super optimistic about it. And I don't even know if you've like thought a whole lot about it, because it's kind of like an obscure smaller school. But do you think they're at play? Do you think they could like get a chance to go to like the Power Five? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think in any way Boise State's obscure from a football standpoint. Of course, the last 20 years have been very good, and Boise State's shown that it can compete at the Power 5 level. So this is a football program that may not be at its peak, but it's close enough. It's had better periods of time, but it's still strong. And I think that Boise State's better than probably a third of every Power 5 conference. Now, that's the upside, that this has been sustainable. People bring up Cincinnati and UCF. Well, they have just recently been strong Group of 5 programs. Boise State's, they have shown that this has been sustainable by them more so than any program in the country.
Yeah, I guess
it's just all the other aspects of it that are against Boise State. As I understand it, academically, they do not meet the research standards of the Pac-12. It's not a large TV market. It's kind of up in that area of the country by itself. So there was always the money consideration. But if the Big 12 was just trying to survive and grab programs, I think Boise State would be high on the list. But in terms of Boise State going anywhere else, it seems somewhat remote.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess when I said obscure, I didn't necessarily mean like, I guess when it comes to like the bigger schools like Texas, and, Oklahoma, like everyone has that on their mind first. So like, I guess obscure was the wrong word to use. But I guess what I'm hoping, like, I mean, at the very least, if like the Broncos can't make it to like a power conference, I would hope that, and I don't know how it's going to be with like the new playoff, but I'm hoping that they give like a Big 12 spot to like a G5 team or something like that, because even when like the new or the most recent playoff came out, like the team of 4, we thought maybe there could be a chance that we get that like 4th spot, but then we saw UCF, went like those 2 years undefeated. And they always like put them out like number 5, and so I don't know. So like at the very least, I hope that they give like a G5 a spot, and if they don't, then I kind of hope that. And this is also a question too. Like, do you think that they might just make like a very distinct cut between like the G5 and the Power 5? Because there's like that division right now where there's like a distinction between it, but it's not like FCS, where you have like different postseasons. And I guess that's what I would like to see, where at the very latest, like I know the Bronco fans, like we'd love to see like our team like in like a playoff like that and playing like super big schools. But at the very end of the day, like, I mean, if you're not going to give us a spot, we just want you to be straightforward and honest with us, and kind of want to just have a chance to compete in like whatever division we.
Yeah, so I've been saying for quite a long time that the powers that be need to make a decision about the Group of 5. That right now the Group of 5 is just floating out there, and there is this condescending type. Forget what term I use. I use it a zillion times in describing this situation, but basically they are given consideration in theory. Like the College Football Playoff Selection Committee is teasing the Group of 5 to a certain extent because they are in the rankings. So they're saying we give you consideration, and it's almost a backhanded insult that you're put in the rankings and you should feel good about your teams being number 11 and 17 and 24. But if UCF went undefeated 2 consecutive years in the regular season, and you mentioned number 5, UCF wasn't close to number 5 in the country. I believe their positions were 12 and I'd have to look it up. Cincinnati was number 8, I believe, as an undefeated team this past year. I'm almost positive that is the highest ranked Group of 5 team at the conclusion of the regular season. So we've seen at least 3 undefeated teams not anywhere close to consideration for the playoffs. So it's a bit of a backhanded compliment to say we're going to rank your teams, but you're really not considered. There's really nothing you can do to make the playoffs. So that's the current format. The proposed format, and it's been my thought to say you either need to formally include the Group of 5 or discard the Group of 5 and tell them to go play their own playoff. One or the other. Okay, well, the playoff proposals that are out there that were unveiled had a seat at the table for the Group of 5, that the highest ranked Group of 5 champion would automatically make the playoff. And that didn't eliminate a second Group of 5 team from possibly making the playoff, although I ran the numbers and the rankings through the 7 years of college football playoffs, and it would always be one Group of 5 team making the one exception would have been this past season in this strange COVID year where there were odd number of games being played. The Coastal Carolina and Cincinnati would have made the playoff in a 12-team format, but all the other years, the highest ranked Group of 5 would have been the only G5 team to make it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I think that, I don't know, there's a part of me that's like, you know, it is kind of fair. Like, I understand why you have like a 2-loss SEC team, or, you know, like a 2-loss like Big Ten team getting in there before that. Cause I mean, yeah, like the schedules are not as strong. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's just been kind of frustrating. I'm just got a lot of Bronco fans here that are just kind of curious about what the future holds. And I mean, at this point, we're not necessarily optimistic by any means, you know, but when it comes to like getting into the Power 5 or like getting into a bigger conference like that. But I don't know, just something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. Call back sometime.
For sure, will do. Thanks.
Before we take our next call, just wanted to make sure we get these super chats squared away because we got our guy Falconer X chiming in. Must have caught whether that was my appearance on Michigan Podcast with Steve Days or Steve Days cut a segment with us that we released this morning. Steve Days nailed it, as he often does. This may change everything. Great show with him, and I have no love for Michigan. So, you know, you're doing a nice job when the fan base hates you or hates your particular team, but still gives you cred for a good opinion there. Then we also have Falconer X stating that, thank you so much for the super chat. You know that, Falconer X. Send Florida to the ACC since they can't win the SEC. Plus, they won't be able to dodge the U anymore. So, of course, that coming from a Canes fan that wants Florida to be a more common opponent, and there's been a certain vendetta that Miami has with Florida not scheduling many out-of-conference games. I've got a bit of a defense for Florida football for that, for those people that I've heard that want Miami and Florida to play every year. The Gators obviously already play Florida State every year, and they're not just going to load up on Miami and play those two set opponents every year. They want more variety to their schedule for a number of reasons, but probably should play Miami more often. Thank you so much for the super chat there. We got a call coming in from, I believe, John from Alabama. John, welcome to the Voice of College Football.
You hear me?
Hey, John.
Hey, big fan of the show. Just found it. I just wanted to call in, talk about some football with you.
Cool.
I'm an Oklahoma fan, and I live in Alabama, so I'm happy about this
Interesting.
move.
Okay.
I've been hearing my whole life how Oklahoma can't compete in the SEC. They're just Arkansas playing in an easier conference. So we're going to come in and we're going to prove them wrong.
Yeah, well, that will be interesting. I posted a video the other day where I tried to give some perspective on what Oklahoma has done against the SEC the last 10 years or so. and how it projects forward. And you well know, as good as I do, if not better, that the Oklahoma football program's in the healthiest shape that it's been in a long, long time, even though Bob Stoops was tremendous. Lincoln Riley has actually even increased the talent level. So they seem to be well prepared to play and compete in the SEC.
Exactly. I agree. I do want to talk about recruiting, though. I think for my teams, it's going to be great for our recruiting. Texas A&M's been stealing our recruits the last few years that we would normally get. Just talking about SEC, and there's guys that pick A&M just because of SEC, and those guys are going to start coming back to Oklahoma. But my question is, will you start seeing teams take less recruits every year to try to pick up more transfers? Because with name, image, and likeness, I see this as being just like a feeding league to the NFL. If you're at Tulsa and they get some diamond in the rough that turns out to be great, like they had that linebacker last year, went first round, why would someone like that not just transfer up and make more money out in Oklahoma or in Alabama? So why not take half the normal recruits, take 15 guys a year, 12, and then just go pick up transfers that are starters at other schools, like at Tulsa or in Oklahoma State, transfer up to the big leagues?
Well, here's my thought, is that what's going to come out of this transfer portal at some point has to be some type of guru or set of gurus that understand it better than the rest of us, because we had this with the BCS formula. You had Brad Edwards emerge as the BCS expert that understood the formula better than anyone. You got Joe Lenardi with bracketology, who understands the brackets, and a few other people that crunch those brackets. We almost need a transfer portal individual. So what I'm not understanding that somebody would have to explain to me is that we know that there are 85 scholarships distributed for every football team in the nation that plays FBS football. So when player A transfers from Auburn and is in the transfer portal, that position, that scholarship is open at Auburn. So then let's say Cal jumps in and grabs that player and they're added to their team. Well, Cal now is down a scholarship. They have one less scholarship to give in the recruiting class because they have selected this player out of the portal, while Auburn has an additional scholarship. So the net gain or loss for this across college football should be negligible. It should be zero. I don't know. I keep hearing that all these players are entering the transfer portal and there's not enough spots, and it's taking away scholarships from high school athletes. I'm not getting. That would have to be explained to me, because every player that enters this transfer portal is leaving a school as well as being picked up by another school. So the net result is zero.
That's true. That makes sense. Do you feel like we're going to start seeing more players transferring up in level? I feel like right now we mostly see players transferring down, like a backup at an Oklahoma or an Alabama transfers to go start at Tulsa or whoever. You think we're going to start seeing players transferring up? So someone's a starter at Iowa State, like Breece Hall. If, like with name, image, and likeness, why wouldn't Breece Hall leave Iowa State and go make more money at Bama? Like, why wouldn't a school like Iowa State basically become a junior college in terms of just developing players for the 5 or 10 big schools?
Well, it's a good point that you make.
That can pay.
So I think we're making some assumptions to a certain extent, and it's understandable that there are going to be more NIL opportunities for players at Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, etc. Well, that remains to be seen. Now, we know that there aren't going to be as many NIL opportunities at Appalachian State and Arkansas State as the schools I just mentioned. But even if Miami's somewhat down or USC's somewhat down, they're located in Miami and Los Angeles. Are there still going to be ample opportunities? So what you're saying makes sense, that Alabama has the football brand, prestige, everything working in its favor, playing the SEC, for that to be attractive for businesses to market players and attach themselves to players. So that's more attractive than Iowa State. So that would seem to make sense. I want to see it play out that way, because what you just brought up, I got to admit, I haven't had anybody bring that up. I haven't heard that mentioned. I've heard it from the other side, and we've already seen it, as you mentioned. We've seen it happen because of a playing time decision. We could see it going forward in NIL, where when there's 4 and 5 star quarterbacks loaded in the Georgia quarterback room, that 1 or 2 of them think, not only do I want to play, I want to play because backup players aren't getting NIL deals, because who wants to be attached to a backup quarterback? I got to play somewhere. So instead of being the backup at Georgia, I'm going to go to Wake Forest and be the starting quarterback and make some money. What you bring to the tables, yeah, it's an interesting thought. It seems logical.
Yep. One last point, then I'll go. I think something Mike Leach brought up the other day that I thought was an interesting point. If we start seeing too much like free agency basically going on in college football, he proposed the idea of, if you graduate from the school you signed with out of high school, you get something like $100,000 or X amount of dollars if you graduate from that school as an incentive to stay. And that could just come out of like the TV money. And I thought that was an interesting point.
Okay.
So I was going to get your opinion on that. And thanks for having me.
Well, it's an interesting point. I will say, on the flip side, I don't know what the financial incentive is for the university to that degree to hold on to a player. I know that it costs money, just like, for example, when I worked in the corporate world, we were told that it cost like $80,000 to process the paperwork and deal with the issue of somebody leaving the company and then replacing them. So there is some correlation to that in terms of players leaving school, going to other schools, and just the money. I don't know what that number would be, but it is costly to some extent. I don't know if it would be worth it to compensate $100,000, but I guess he's just throwing out a number to say there should be some incentive, because it's costing us money, and also just time and manpower and effort, and making it very confusing and a workload to keep track of all of this all the time. So, interesting thought. Thank you so much for the call. Appreciate it. All right. Good show tonight. Appreciate everybody jumping on the line. I believe we've got nobody on the line right now, so please don't call. We've been on the line for, good golly, pushing 3 hours, 2:42. Thank you so much for being here. Let me catch this other super chat coming in from Kevin. Thank you so much for that. I want you guys to know the super chats are appreciated so much. Great show, Mark. May you live in interesting times. Well, I think we all do right now, both in the sports world and outside of sports. No question about that. If you had any specific comment or question that you wanted to get to me, certainly I can't get to all of them, but I appreciate it, everyone who's on the line. All right, folks, humor me very quickly. I should do this and will do this in another portion of the show going forward, but Tri-State Sketch, Tri-State Wood Sketch, TriStateWoodSketch.com. Buy one, get one free. Here's their handiwork. Here's an example right here. Now, no, you are not purchasing this unless you really want to. I can't imagine anybody would. You would not be purchasing this. This is just an example of their work. It's phenomenal. Doesn't do it justice. Actually, why don't we do this? Forget that, because I built that slide back before this was delivered. So that's actually what it looks like in person. So basically, you choose the photo. You send them a photo of a loved one or dog or cat or beach scene or something. that you want, and you choose your surface, and they produce a quality product right there. So you buy one, you get one free. Please drop my name, Mark, Voice of College Football, and buy one, get one free for that deal right there. Also, keep in mind that we are at voiceofcollegefootball.com. You can get yourself set for the season right there, voiceofcollegefootball.com. Go to the store at the top of the screen and shop for your favorite merchandise for game day and otherwise right there at voiceofcollegefootball.com. All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Appreciate all of you being here. And we will be back. Let's see. This is a Wednesday. Of course it is. So we'll be back on Thursday at 7 live, Thursday at 7 for Miami Live. That is Thursday at 7. And again, we could pop up here. Who knows when? We've been having nice crowds come in. So I thank all of you. And I don't want to wreck my set of wreck my wood sketch there. So I better hang it up for the night. We've been on here broadcasting since early this morning. So we will see everyone next time. Thank you so much for your support. You guys are the best. I am doing exactly the same thing that I've been doing forever. This success is coming because of all of you getting the word out. So please continue to do that. Share the videos out on social media. Just let people know that we're here talking college football nonstop with all of you. And you know what? How about this? I have determined and I have committed myself and I've thrown it out there, so I cannot get off the hook yet to doing this. Let me find the slide. I can't find it. For our bingo 24-hour live stream for our college football launch. So leading into the season, not week 0, week 1, leading into the season, we're going to be here for 24 hours straight live. I'll take any suggestions, any tips, any advice on how I'm going to survive this and what we're going to do. You may see a blank screen for 4 hours while I sleep. I don't know. I'm not going to sleep for 4 hours. That's not going to happen. No, I'm not going to take that kind of time off. Maybe I'll have a few fill-in people here. Also, folks, we have some post-game plans. For those of you who have caught us on a regular basis during the season, so many of you jumped on board since last college football season, you know that Saturday is huge here at the Voice of College Football with live call-in shows. Okay. I am taking that to another level this year with a number of team-specific call-in shows. So, and post-game shows. So if you or anyone you know is capable and would like to help us with post-game shows, hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. MarkRogersTV at Gmail if you're interested in helping us with our post-game coverage this fall. All right, little Red Bull coming in from Pro Player 2000. Absolutely. We could have, yes, George come on, and he's going to kill 3 or 4 hours himself. I just, George calls in, bam, I hook him up to the line. I walk away. I got a couch 10 feet away. I take a nap. George takes it away from there. Great suggestion there. And I just picked up a subscriber. That's nice to see. All right, everyone. Great to be here talking college football with you. This is my favorite portion of everything that I do, is talking directly with you as much as I possibly can. We will see you soon. Again, that's going to be Miami Thursday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time. And for you newbies, this is not our only channel. We've got a Miami channel. We've got other channels, 23 total channels. So the Miami show's over on the Miami channel, 7 o'clock Thursday night. See you then.